So it is 9 o'clock. Good morning. This is our last class before your TPS exam. So hopefully you're all feeling relieved at this point, possibly a little stressed. I do know those practice problems were difficult, but we will have time. And of course, you have a week before your exam will be due. You can practice during the next week. You can email me with questions, with problems. I will look at anything you need me to look at, and I will do my best as well to stay a little bit late today if necessary. So we'll make sure everybody has had opportunities to ask whatever questions you might have. If you're just logging in now, I want to give you a quick heads up. We're going to do things in a different order today. We're going to start with all of the new types of data entry we have to do. I'm going to go through all of that first. Then I'm going to talk about the TPS exam, answer any questions you might have about it. I want to show you how to get access to it as well. Then we'll take a break, and then we're going to jump in at the end and do as many of the practice problems as possible. If I don't finish all the practice problems today, I'm going to do my best, but if I don't finish them all today, I'm going to make sure that in my next class, I will do a recording of the ones that I haven't reviewed, so you'll have that available to you as well. All right, but let's jump in now. We're going to share my screen. I'm going to pull up my DT Max. And we're going to start with, let me see if this is actually in our in-class assignment. I don't think it is, but just in case it's in there, I'm going to be adding some information as I always do, and it is. That's excellent. So I'm going to split screen. And we're going to talk about a few sections you may not have looked at or considered thinking about. Now, I know for you, for my students, you've already been looking at it because I've been asking you to look at it. But at this point in the course, it's a good opportunity to see what resources we have within the course that you may not have been paying attention to. Sorry, my mouse is causing me headaches here. I'm just going to close that. That's what I wanted to do. And I'm going to split screen my DT Max as well. Hopefully by now you've found a system that works for you and will work for you for your exam as well. And again, I will be reviewing how to print things in case you're nervous about having your DT Max running while you're doing your exam. So we'll have that as an option. So what we're going to start with is our Erickson file. So if we can all find Claudia Erickson. And just a reminder, Claudia was a single person who had an address for me in Winnipeg, for you in the location that you are in, with a single T4 and a scholarship, and was a full-time student for 8 months as well. Okay. And what I'm going to suggest that we forgot to add, maybe we got to the end of the client interview, and I'll tell you this happened in one of my first years doing tax. I was very happy. I'd focused. I'd done the tax return. I had the T4 in, and the very next thing that happened, I was about to print everything, and the client said, and what about my children? I hadn't asked if she had children. So we're going to assume that we prepared everything, and the very last thing that we forgot to ask about was whether or not she had any big life changes, and she's going to tell you January 1st, 2021, she gave birth to her first daughter. Now, in a real-world scenario, I would be asking additional information like, is the father of that child living with her? Because then we have to think about things like common law spouse situations. In this case, they have not lived together at any point. But we do need to add Jasmine. So I'm going to ask everyone to do that. We're going to add a dependent, and this is a good refresher of how to add dependents. So I'm going to add a new client here to the current family. Add them as a dependent. If you add her daughter as her spouse, you're going to create problems for her, so make sure you add as a dependent. Double check the last name. The last name of the child may not always be the same as the last name of the parent. In this case, they share a last name. I'm going to type in Jasmine. I'm going to say daughter. No SIN number. The birth date is January 1st, 2021. And I want to make sure the metropolitan area matches. Okay. Right off the bat, if I go back to the income before I even take a look at the tax return, if I go back to the income for Claudia, I know that Claudia has low income during the year, Claudia was a full-time student, and Claudia is a single parent. What refundable credit should I be thinking about? What checklist should I be pulling out in this scenario? Eligible dependent is the first one. Absolutely. I want to make sure that she is not being supported in a way that would make her ineligible for this. So that would not be support from a court order, but I would need to ask if she had support from a court order agreement, or any voluntary support would make the eligible dependent be a problem. The second one, Karina, you've thought of it, Canada Workers Benefit. So after I've done my eligible dependent checklist, the computer will give her an eligible dependent. Hopefully, the computer will also now give her a Canada Workers Benefit. And if we do the checklist, we have to know why she's eligible, because normally you cannot claim Canada Workers Benefit if you're a full-time student, but that gets overridden again if you had an eligible dependent at the end of the year. The end of the year is important. So your checklist is going to give you that information, but you may need to go and override or otherwise update the information. If she had an eligible dependent at the beginning of the year but not the end of the year, she would no longer be eligible. So every time you do this, the computer will calculate it based on the information you gave it, but you may need to give it more information for it to be accurate. In this case, how much is she getting for Canada Workers Benefit? So now she should be getting the base amount for herself plus an amount because she had an eligible dependent, so she's going to get a little bit extra there. Her total benefit will be $2,403. Okay. What are some of the other things that would make it impossible for her to get Canada Workers Benefit? If she had higher income, absolutely. But going into the things that we would have to tell the computer about, if she had higher income, we'd put the higher income in. If her dependent is not living with her at the end of the year, we would have to override, or in this case, transfer OV to say don't claim the dependent portion because at the end of the year she's not eligible and then she'd be a full-time student. We'd have to override that. What else? I'm going to give you a little hint here. My little yellow sticky note. What's another thing that could have happened to her in the year that would make her not eligible for Canada Workers Benefit if she was in prison? So I want to teach you how to tell the computer that she was in prison for a period of 90 days or more and therefore does not qualify. And the good news is we don't have to do this using optimize or override. I would like you to notice that way up at the top under personal information, we have a keyword, prison. So up at the top, that's why we have this keyword. It will override any number of different credits or benefits that a person might not be eligible for based on the fact that they were in prison. So if she was in prison for more than a year, in prison at the end of the year more than 6 months, that might be relevant. In prison at the end of the year for 90 days, but 6 months or less. In prison at any point in the year for 90 days or more, you're going to have to determine the appropriate one. If I pick that she was in prison 90 days or more, what should happen to my Canada Workers Benefit? The checklist says it should be removed. The computer will remove it for you. So if that's the case, that's the information that you're going to put. And again, I'm showing you this with Canada Workers Benefit. Being in prison can affect any number of other lines as well. So there will be other things your client will not be eligible for if they were in prison. Brittany, that's a good question. It's a sensitive subject. Do we outright ask that question? So what I would say is that kind of comes in with the client interview as well. So some of the things that are going to lead us into that question would be just a question about like, what were you doing last year? If you notice that they had partial work but not income for the whole year, you'll ask what they were doing in the months when they weren't working, and that may come up at that point. If you notice that they have moved a couple of times, they may have some unstable addresses, and one of the reasons they may have an unstable address is that for part of the year, their address was a correctional facility or group home or similar type of place, and from that, the conversation comes up. So it is really a question of making sure that as you're doing your client interview, you are looking for things where you may have to ask. And it is a sensitive question, and it's simple to say, I'm just asking because I need to know to do your tax return accurately. Is this something that's happened to you in the last year? If not, we can move on. If it is, I just need a yes or a no, and I don't need any details. Your client will tell you what they need to tell you. I have had clients who have been in prison. So this is something that I have had to deal with, and it hasn't been unduly complicated. But yes, you want to look for a clue that it may be a question that you have to ask. All right, so if we've done that, I would like to take that data entry out because Claudia was not in prison, and we're going to leave that file as is. Just a reminder, when you see a Canada Workers Benefit on the tax return and you see that it is generating an answer, you should be looking into it. You should be pulling at your checklist and making sure, because you may be assuming if the computer gives it to them that they're entitled to it, and you may have forgotten some of the details. So that's one where if you think there should be a Canada Workers Benefit and there isn't, you should investigate why there isn't one. And if there is one and you weren't expecting to see one, you should go back through your checklist and find out, is there additional data entry that I have to do in order to get the right answer? All right, any questions about that one? I've been asking you up till now to look at your Canada Workers Benefits. Anna Maurice, you've noticed that I have an entry under tuition for transfer tuition. Let me take a look at that. So if I remember correctly, she wanted to transfer her tuition to a parent. So we're going to talk about this when we get to the problem itself, which we haven't reviewed yet. But in this case, she wanted to transfer her tuition. So we can take a look at that now. In order to do that, what I had to do was calculate her tuition first, find out how much she needed to use. For federal, she didn't need to use any this year. She was eligible to transfer all of it. She wanted to transfer all of it, but she was not connected to another person that she could transfer it to. So we had to use the transferring override. And then, same thing, I'm going to generate a Schedule 11. The default in the computer is to say don't transfer it because she's not connected. And in this case, we're going to find out how much she's eligible to transfer, and I'm going to transfer the eligible portion. And I have changed the number. There's a reason that I have changed that number. I'm going to change it back in a minute, but it should be 5,000. Helene asks, is there a way to link her parent in 23.5? This is one of those scenarios where I wouldn't do it. So if the only reason, if you have two separate files, the student came in on their own and then the parents came in afterwards to become clients, you don't want to start messing around with cloning. There's no way to make her a dependent if she's already a family head except to clone her in, and we only want to clone when it's necessary. Because we can do the tuition transfer without having to do any of that, we're not going to. Especially, I will say, with adult students or students who are on their own now, because they're only going to be transferring tuition for a couple of years, and then they're going to be on their own, and we have to clone them out again, and now we've got 3 copies of them. So always looking ahead to keeping the client as a long-time client and thinking about what's going to be the best process for us. We would transfer her in if she became a dependent for other areas. So if it turns out that she later had a disability and she's going to transfer a disability, she's a dependent as an adult beyond just tuition transfers, then we would clone her in. Excellent question. All right, I'm going to take this amount out and I'm going to put it back to the 5,000 because this is what it should be. And I'll talk about why I changed it when we get to the practice problem. Good. Any other questions about Canada Workers Benefit, about inputting additional information? Okay, I'm going to enter another, what was Jasmine's birthday again? Yes, so some of you may have caught the fact that I made a mistake when I did it the first time. Jasmine's birthday in this one is January 1st, 2021. Let me make sure I got that right. Claudia Erickson is connected to her daughter Jasmine. She was born January 1st, 2021, at the beginning of the year, which of course will give us a Canada Child benefit, a total entitlement of $6,997. All right, so I'm going to go into the next type of data entry. It's going to feel a little bit disjointed today because I'm just going to throw a bunch of the last minute extra things that I had to do that we didn't fit into a different chapter. So the next file I want you to open up is your Lillian Richards file. We have to go a little ways back for that one, so I'm going to see if I can find it here. That was in chapter 20. Lillian Richards, if you remember, had lots and lots of different sources of income. She had a T4. She is a teacher. She had some investments. And then we had an RRSP transfer, so very, very complicated file. What I want to teach you next is what happens if she also had a receipt for an LSVCC. So does anyone remember what the LSVCC is? It's a labor-sponsored venture capital corporation. If she purchased shares in an LSVCC in Manitoba, she is entitled to a credit for that, and we need to input that in the computer. What I want you to remember, generally speaking, and this is true most of the time, but in Manitoba, unfortunately not all of the time, most of the time if we're looking for something province-specific, we're going to go down to the very, very bottom, and we're going to see where it says provincial tax and credits. And I'd like you to go there first. It's going to ask you for the province, and we can only pick Manitoba because we've chosen to make them a resident of Manitoba. And it's going to open up a very large section that I'm going to spend a lot of time in today. And I want you to notice about halfway down here, it's going to have labor-sponsored venture capital contributions. So if she had an LSVCC, let's assume she had 3,000. We're going to say, when did she acquire the shares? Within the first 60 days of 2022 or after the first 60 days of 2021. So it's just like RSPs, March to December, and then January, February. Let's assume it was made on July 31st, 2021. So we're going to say shares acquired after the first 60 days. And I'm going to say 3,000. Okay. Once I put in an LSVCC of 3,000, where will that show up on the tax return? I'm looking for it in two places. Does anyone remember? I'm going to start with the Manitoba. And if you remember, we have an LSVCC page 3, line 60800, should give us a credit of 450. The computer did the calculation for you. If you don't remember how to do that calculation, this is one where you can generally trust the computer. It should match what is on the T2C slip, which is the type of slip you're going to get in Manitoba for an LSVCC. And then, even though it's a provincial type of amount, we're going to go to the federal return. We're going to find our page 6, page 7, I think. Page 7. And we're going to take a look at the matching federal credit. So the provincial credit is 15%, the federal credit is 15%. The computer will report the total amount and then the 15% on the federal return and just the allowable amount on the provincial return. So the computer will do that for you. All right, any questions about LSVCCs? The simple thing about it is that if it is on a tax slip, you just need to know to look for it in the provincial section for data entry. And Helene, if you think it's on page 6 and it's on page 7, I do that all the time. We don't look at page 7 very much, although we should be looking at it for dividend tax credits. It is less common that we see LSVCCs or political donations, which is the other one that we're going to do, political contributions. Less common that we see those, but we'll be looking at those today. So if you end up on the REN page, just keep scrolling down until you find the credit. And I would say don't stress too much about memorizing page numbers. Sometimes they change them. In the last couple of years, they have completely flipped my tax return for me. It was 4 pages, then they made it 8 pages, and then they changed the order of all the lines. Not all the lines, but definitely this section. So something we have to get used to. Every time we come and sit down at a tax return, it might look a little bit different. The thing to remember is it's always income, then deductions, then it will be either tax and then non-refundable credits or non-refundable credits and then tax. They do that in different orders in different years, and at the very end, refundable. All right, so that is LSVCCs. We're going to leave the LSVCCs in. I would like to add in some additional information, and this is what happens if she made a political contribution. And let's assume she made a $600 contribution to the Conservative Party, and this is the Conservative Party of Canada. So we know it's a federal one. I'm going to tell you I like the keyword for this one. If you just type in politic, you will find federal political contributions. You can use the Smart Start. It's going to be just underneath medical and charitable. It still goes in the order of the tax return, just harder to find on the list. If you can remember politic or political, how to spell that, you're going to find it. You should identify the party if you can, because that's going to confirm you looked at the receipt. And it was $600. Where will the $600 go on the return? It's going to go back onto page 7, and it's also going to generate a worksheet. The worksheet will now have the calculation of LSVCC, and it will have the political contribution. This is important to remember when we get to adjustments. If you're doing an adjustment and the adjustment is calculated on the worksheet, you should be saving a copy of the worksheet and sending it with the adjustment. So it's something to look for. It should be in 2 places. Good. I'd like you to notice that it is not going to show up on the Manitoba form, because remember, LSVCCs are matched, the federal and provincial, but political contributions only go to the government level that they are connected to. So we will not have a Manitoba contribution unless she made one. So I'm going to tell you that she made one. She made a $300 contribution to the Conservative Provincial Party, so the Manitoba Conservatives. So again, data entry, if it's provincial, you should be looking in your provincial credit section. If I go down far enough, you're going to find Politic Prov, political contributions, provincial donations. And in this case, we don't enter the party because there's nowhere to put it. We're just going to say $300. If you want to, you can attach a note. I wouldn't stress overly about this. She's going to know who she contributed to probably. So 3 years down the road, if she gets an audit or request for info, she'll be able to find that receipt. All right, so now we have some LSVCCs. We have a provincial political contribution. We have a federal political contribution. What's going to happen to her tax return now? So again, you can see my provincial contributions, and I will have a provincial worksheet with the calculation, which comes out to $225. Should now have less owing. She's bumped herself all the way up to a tiny, tiny refund. Okay, any questions about those ones? They're a little bit more straightforward because you have a receipt, you enter the receipt. Your textbook will be a good resource for finding where to enter these receipts. These are not things I expect you to memorize. These are things that I expect you to look up. The tricky one is you have to look up anything provincial in the Manitoba Provincial Supplement. So you will find the data entry there, not in your federal textbook. All right, we're going to do a few more. So I've added LSVCCs. I've added 2 different political contributions. I'm also going to tell you she has subscribed to the Globe and Mail digital subscription, and she has a receipt. So I'm going to type this one in over here for you. And she has a receipt for $108.65 for this year. She's not sharing it with anyone, but remember, if she is sharing it with anyone, then we would have to figure that out. Okay. You have to be a little bit careful if it's Globe and Mail. It may have a print aspect and a digital aspect, and you can't claim the print portion of the cost, only the digital portion of the cost. So you may have to do a little bit of figuring things out there as well. So if they have a digital access charge, for example, then you can only claim the digital access charge. Okay, let's talk about how to do the data entry next. So you can use the keyword digital. It's going to take you to digital news. You're going to pick qualifying digital news subscription. You're going to say who the subscription is for. You're going to say the amount. Okay. And if she's not entitled to the entire portion, because maybe she's not entitled to the GST, so it's not entitled to the digital access charge, so we have to take the digital access charge plus GST out of it. We have to figure out what that is. If you do all those calculations, it might be a little bit less. It might be $103.48. So that's taking off a monthly access calculation plus 5% GST to get to that number. And then if you want to share this with another person, so maybe there's 2 people who are in the same family that are using it, or you are sharing it with your neighbor, you can choose to share it with your spouse. If you have a spouse, it will automatically transfer a portion to them. Or if you're sharing it with a different person who's not connected to your file or basically isn't your spouse, then you're going to be able to share it with them. It's going to ask you how much do you want to share. So if she's sharing this with her neighbor, she wants to claim half of it plus the $3.48 because why not? She's going to let her neighbor claim 50. Then you're going to say how much she's going to claim. If I go to the tax return, now this one I have to double check my own data entry for because this is still fairly new. So I want to see if that shares it the way that I intended. This is allowing her to share only $50. So what it's asking me for here is how much do I want the other person to have? If I want the other person to have $50, I'm going to say 50. Then I can go back in and I can go, yes, she's going to claim the extra $3.48. And that's how I would split that out. Okay, any questions about that one? It is a non-refundable credit, so once you do your data entry, you know which page of the tax return you're looking for it. Every time you do data entry, you should be looking for it on the tax return and making sure it makes sense. Okay, any questions about that one? Wonderful. I'm going to add another one now. She's a teacher. If she's a teacher for secondary school or grade school or kindergarten, what might she have? What additional credit should we be asking her about? expenses for the eligible educator school supply credit. Wonderful. So let's talk about how to enter that. Let's assume that she paid $1,500 and we have verified them and we have all the documents and all the letters that we want. So she has claimed $1,500. If you use the keyword teacher, it will take you to other tax credits and it will enter a teacher amount. So I'm going to put $1,500 in there, and it's going to tell me you can't do that because I'm limited to 1,000. So the computer will warn me that that number is too high, and it will tell me, please correct that. So I will correct it. And then I will make a note, and I will say expenses of 1,000, all valid, or sorry, 1,500, all valid, limited to 1,000. And if I had any other conversation with her as well about whether or not to claim it in a different manner, we would have had that conversation already. Good. When I do that, I should be looking for the information in two places. The first one that I should be looking for is on the refundable credit right at the very end of the return, and it should give me $250, which it is. Where's the second place that I should look for that? On the Manitoba form, and it's the very last line. So then you want to go and make sure the computer did it. It did, so I don't need to do any extra data entry in the provincial section. The computer knew if it's on the federal form, this is one that matches, and it will do the matching for you. Excellent. Any questions about that one? So we've done quite a bit already. We have done LSBC, we've done Canada Workers Benefit, confirmation, we've done what happens if your client was in prison or otherwise exempt for things that we need to adjust for. We've done LSVCCs, we've done political contributions, we've done digital news, we've done eligible educator school supply. Helene, why did I take the GST off the GNM? I didn't just take the GST, I took the digital access fee. So you can claim the subscription, but not the digital access fee. If the digital access fee was $1.99, sorry, I didn't explain that very well. Assuming the digital access fee was $1.99 per month, I have to take that plus the GST on $1.99 per month off, which is how I got the number. So if you have a breakdown, you have to make sure you think about it. And hopefully the information is on the receipt. It should be. We haven't seen a lot of these receipts yet. This is still a fairly new credit. So I've had a few clients who claimed it, and in those ones, it was very clear that it was digital only, and everything was eligible. But every different news organization could have its own receipt. So you're going to have to dig a little bit and just make sure that you can tell what the receipt is for. And remember to look for the news organization on the list of the CRA as well to make sure that they are registered. This will become more standard in a couple of years as everyone decides what they want the receipt to look like. But for now, it's still fairly new. Okay, so I have one more big one that I want to do that's federal, and then we're going to do a whole bunch of provincial things. So for this one, I would like you to change from Lillian's file and switch to Adam and Eve. So I'm going to find Adam over here. And I'm also going to pull up, if I can, some more information, which is adoption expenses. So I'm going to teach you how to do adoption expenses. Let's assume for the purpose of this case that Luke was adopted. So if you remember this file, we had Adam and Eve, and they have two children. They have Ruth and they have Luke. If Luke was adopted and the adoption went through this year, we can claim the adoption expenses. And what you're going to do is enter the correct information. Okay? You have to claim it on the parent's data entry screen. So this is confusing because almost every time we have something connected to a dependent, you're going to actually have to identify which dependent it is. In this case, it's going to be which parent we're going to put it on. So let's put it on Adam's first. And I can just use the keyword adoption. Or you can use your Smart Start, and it's a deduction. So you want to look in your deduction section, and you should find adoption in there. Okay, it's going to ask me who the adoption was for, and then it's going to ask me which expenses he had. So let's assume that we had some legal fees and some adoption fees. So if I had adoption fees of $8,750 and I had some legal fees in addition of $2,600, I can put those in there. Let's assume we had some travel expenses for the child, and that was $1,800. Let's assume we had some travel expenses for the parents, $4,200. Remember, you can do your calculations inside, so you don't have to do the calculations on a calculator and then transfer the number over. I can just type them in with a plus. Okay. Then it's going to ask me, do I want to share the expense with the other adoptive parent? So if I want to share some of this with Eve, I could say how much I want to share. Remember, it is limited to how much you can claim. The computer will know what that limit is, but you should be thinking about the limit yourself. And here, if we have adoption expenses, I should have $16,729. If I want to know where that came from, hopefully the computer will tell me. And you're going to notice it's going to give me a nice worksheet. So this worksheet is going to tell me who did Adam adopt, what were the fees, what categories were the fees in, what were the total adoption expenses, and it's going to tell you what the maximum is. The maximum is $16,729. I can't claim more than that. And then it's going to tell me the name of the other adoptive parent. It is the person who's connected to Adam. And if I want to separate it out, I can separate it out there. I'm not going to separate it out to Eve in this case because Eve didn't need any non-refundable credits. So we're good to go with that one. And it's going to tell me what my limit is. Remember, you can adopt more than one child. So if they had adopted two children in the year, I could claim a second adoption amount for a second child and a third child and however many children I have. As long as I'm not double claiming the receipts, I'm good to go. So if the receipts are for multiple children, you'll have to separate them out. Okay. You should enter all of the eligible expenses, even if it's more than the maximum. It's just beneficial to know how much the expenses were. If they get audited, we may have one or two that won't be allowed, but then the other ones will be allowed, and we've claimed them. The computer will limit to what we can actually use. Okay, and just a reminder, we're going to total up everything connected to the adoption, and we're going to claim it in the year that the adoption is finalized. So if the adoption doesn't go through, you can't claim these. You have to wait until it goes through. Okay, the tricky thing to remember is it goes on the parent. It's just very counterintuitive. Everything else related to the dependent goes on the dependent's file. This is one that goes on the parent who's going to claim it on their file. And then, as always, if we can split it, we can split it. Helene, does it matter how far back the expenses are? No, but they have to be reasonably connected to the adoption. So if you had a very time-consuming, expensive adoption that took years and years and years, and you can prove that that's all one adoption, then it's fine. If you tried 3 or 4 different adoptions over a 10-year period, and this is the one that went through, you have to limit it to this specific circumstance. Realistically, if it was that far out, it would be more than the maximum limit anyway. So you should be good to claim the more recent things. Okay. So that's adoption. Any questions about adoption? And again, I apologize if this feels really, really scattered today. The main problem that I have is it's little bits and pieces. So extra things that we need to add in that we haven't taught you how to do in the computer, but you know how to do manually on a tax return. So hopefully at the end of today, you will know how to do everything you need to know. So the last thing that I'm going to do before we talk about the TPS exam and take a short break is provincial. And provincially, we have quite a bit to go over. So I'm going to go through a number of these. I think, what's a good file to do for this one? I want to give someone with a couple, but I don't want this family. So let's go into, and I definitely want seniors as well. Let's do Robert and Margaret Marshall. You should have that one done. I'm going to show you a few things related to them as seniors. I may go into your Dave Duncan one as well. We're going to go in jumping around a little bit. You can practice this data entry on your own, and if you do practice it and you're not sure if you got the right answer, send me an email, tell me what changes you tried to make, and I will tell you if you did your data entry correctly or incorrectly. So the first big one that I want to talk about is our rent credit. So this is our property tax credit, and we're going to notice under provincial we have two sections. One is most of the provincial credits, and the other one is specifically the provincial property tax credit. You do need to remember that refundable provincial credits, so this rent credit in particular, you can only go back 3 years to claim it. If it's older than 3 years, you won't get it. So the refundable credits, anything on an MB 479, you can go back 3 years. After that, you've lost that claim. So we're going to go in here and we're going to assume that they were tenants first. So let's assume they were tenants. You have to pick owner or tenant. It's going to ask for the address. You always have to fill this in completely. So you need the street and the city. You would get that from the top portion of your case file. It's not going to automatically take the same information that it had before because you might have been a tenant in more than one location. You may have been a tenant in one place for 4 months, and then the rest of the year you may have moved. So it's going to let you open more than one of these. So you're going to have to fill that in. I'm going to leave it blank for now. I'm just going to put 123 Test Street because I'm going to be taking this out. And you need a city. They want to know how many months you're claiming for. You don't have to claim for all 12. If you weren't paying rent for all 12, you don't have to. In this case, we're going to say they were renting for all 12. Then it's going to ask how much rent did they pay. You must have receipts. These get audited all the time. Very, very common that we get asked to see them. So we will not put this on a return unless we have the receipt in front of us. We need to be looking at the receipt. So assume in this case that it was $12,000 a month. Roommate means anyone who is not your spouse or child. So if they're a minor child or a spouse, you can leave this blank. But if you had a different roommate, you need the roommate's name because, remember, only one person per address can claim this. So if you put it on your return and your roommate claims it on their return, you're double claiming the expense. And in that case, when they find out that that happened, nobody gets it. So if you have a roommate, you have to say who the roommate is and expect that they're going to be checking their return. And you need a landlord. So I'm going to say Rental Co. Inc. If it's an individual, you need the name of the individual. If it's a property management company, you need the property management company, and it has to be on the receipt. The receipt has to identify the year and the months that the rent is for, and you can always refer to the problem as well to see what is and isn't included in rent. So for example, if you pay for a storage locker or a parking spot, that will not count. Security deposit doesn't count. We get these questions all the time. Just the rent for the place you're living in. All right, if I have done that correctly, when I go to the tax return, I should now have an MB 479. and it's going to have, although they have too much income as a family for the personal tax credit, it's going to have the rent credit in here. Okay, and the question is, can they split it? They can't split it, but they can pick who's going to claim it in most cases. So there are some restrictions where you cannot claim provincial refundable credits, but in most cases you can decide which person is going to get it. The computer will default to the family head. So whoever's data you put it on, it will give it to the family head unless you tell it to do otherwise. You do that, as always, using your optimize functions. And you can say, I know I'm claiming it here, but I'm going to move it over there. Roommates can't split it. They have to pick who's going to claim it. So it's the same thing. So if roommates are renting and they're each paying rent separately, you want to make sure you get a receipt that shows the name of the roommate who is going to be claiming it and the total rent paid for that address so they can claim the full amount. And then the roommates have to split it up themselves. So what I do is I show them on the tax return, this is how much the credit is worth. For 2021, it was $525. This is how much the credit was worth. And then they can divvy it up after they get their refund any way they want to. But that happens after the tax return is done, not on the tax return. Okay, so I mean, I've had this when I was a student and people were in student housing. A lot of that, the first place that I worked was in Brandon, and I worked at an office that was very close to the campus. So we had lots and lots of people in shared housing, and they had to decide who was going to get it. That was when it was still $700. They would decide who was going to get it for the year. They would all agree, and then whoever got the refund once they got it would have to share it with their friends. Or if you know you're going to be renting with the same person for multiple years, you can alternate years, but one per address. Excellent. All right, so in this case, you're going to notice that the computer has done the form correctly. It has taken 20% of the rent paid. It allows 75%, and then it's capped at the maximum. There is an extra amount if they're seniors, which is why I wanted to pick this one. So if they had a lower rent, they might get a top-up on their rent credit because they are seniors. The computer will calculate that for them, and then it will tell them what they actually get. I use transferring between people all the time when you have seniors and you have someone who owes just a little bit of money and the other person is getting a bigger refund. Sometimes we will move the provincial credits to the spouse of the family head, and that puts them both in a refund perspective. They're both getting smaller refunds, but then one person doesn't have to pay. This can be a really useful credit to move between parties, but you do have to be careful to make sure that you are able to transfer to that person. So there are a couple of rules. The big one you need to remember is if the other person is being claimed as a dependent for a credit like a spousal amount, they cannot claim the refundable credit. It has to go to the higher income person in that specific case. If you're not sure, my best advice is try to move it, see what happens. If what happens isn't what you wanted to happen, go to your provincial supplement and double check the rules and say, I wanted to do that. Why is the computer not letting me do it? All right, so that's what happens if you are a renter. What happens if you're not a renter? What happens if you're an owner? Well, if you're an owner, you have a different set of information. And this is going to warn me when I change this, it's going to delete what I had in there, and I'm going to say, yes, I want to do that. It's still going to ask me for the address and the number of months, but now it wants to know the municipality. You're going to get this from the property tax statement. Again, you're going to need the property tax statement to do this. So you're going to look for the municipality, Winnipeg. It's going to ask for a roll number. That will be at the top. Whatever the roll number is, you're going to put it in. I'm going to leave it blank just because I don't have a made-up one right now. Then it's going to ask for possibly two different numbers. One is net school taxes, and the other is gross school taxes. And this will show up on the property tax statement. You're going to see one figure for net school taxes. You might, in some circumstances, see a different figure for gross. If it's the same for both, you're just going to put the same thing in both places. Let's assume in this case that they paid $2,000 net and $2,500 gross. The next thing you have to look for is to see, did they already get credit for the rent, for the property tax? Because most people receive their property tax credit already, and it just reduces what they have to pay on their property tax bill. If you look at that property tax statement and you see $525 minus on it somewhere, it means they've already gotten it. We have to adjust for that. So we do that in the provincial section. So in the provincial section, I'm going to go to Manitoba, and you're going to notice we have home tax assist. So if I put home tax assist in, I'm going to say $525 is what they got. That's going to give them credit for the fact they already had it. Now you might be asking me, what's the point of putting in the property tax statement if they already got the credit? So I'm going to throw that one back at you. Why, in this specific circumstance, am I going to enter in all of this data if they already got their provincial property tax amount? So I'm going to go here, and it's going to say they're entitled to $525, and it's going to say they got $525, they're getting $0. I could have avoided all of this. But what might I be thinking about? I might be thinking about whether or not they qualify for a senior school tax rebate or a school tax credit for homeowners. In this case, their income is too high, but there will be circumstances where their income is not too high. So I'm going to see if the Simons are, I think the Munsons are a good one for that. So I'm going to do this again on Ted Munson now, because I think his income is just about low enough for this to work. So if I go in here and I say property tax as an owner, and I'm going to say 12 months, should have a roll number, but I don't. And I need to put my credit in, and I'm going to say home tax assist. If I go to the tax return here, let's see if that made a difference. So they're still not getting any property tax credit, but look, as a family, low enough income, they are going to get the senior school tax rebate, and that's where I needed the gross income amount, which is different than the net income amount. So if you remember, my net income was $2,000, it was up here. My gross income, $2,500, is a little bit more. They're going to get a little bit more senior school tax rebate as long as I've identified it. That's why we have two different pieces of data entry for this. Again, all of this is in your provincial supplement. Now, in this case, they don't also get the school tax credit. Oh, they do get the school tax credit for homeowners. No, they don't. That one's $0. So at the end of the day, they're going to get no rent credit. They're going to get a little bit of the senior school tax rebate and a little bit of personal credit, and that's where they're going to get their personal credits from. And then again, I might have a choice as to who I'm going to pick. In this case, I don't have a choice. It has to be Ted because Lisa is a dependent spouse. Provincial things are complicated. My best advice is after you do your data entry, look at what the computer did and then make sure you understand it before you file the return. Make sure it makes sense. It gets trickier if you have a couple of things. So one thing that can happen is you could have two people who live in different homes, not because of a breakdown of their relationship, but because of health reasons. So if you have that scenario, you might end up having some additional rent credits. In that case, you're going to have to go in here into provincial tax credits and say separate residence, yes. You're going to do this on the family head. You're going to say, what is the address of the spouse? And can the spouse claim the personal and the education property tax credit? Can you claim it? Can they claim it? And you're going to do it that way. And it will allow that adjustment that you need to do. Again, this data entry is in your provincial supplement. Might be that they are both an owner and a renter. That can happen if they're in a mobile home. This is in the textbook as well. If they're in a mobile home, they're going to have a portion as an owner, and a second portion that they pay rent for. That will be clear because you're going to have a rent receipt and you're going to have a property tax bill. So you're going to enter both as an owner and as a tenant, and it will portion out what you are entitled to get. I have one more thing that I have to show you related to the rent credit, and for that one, I'm going to go into Dave Duncan. So just a reminder on Dave Duncan. Dave Duncan had some social assistance. Is that my Dave Duncan file? I think it is. Nope, that got edited. Well, we're going to work with it. I'm going to work with this one. I do have to change this to 9.2. I will change it back after because somebody else was using this. I'm going to take the home buyer amount out. Make a note. Okay, and if I put in a rent credit in this case, I'm going to put in my rent credit here. Say he was a renter in Winnipeg for 12 months. Let's say he paid $800 a month times 12 months. And the landlord is Landlord Inc. What if he received rent assistance? I would have to include that information as well. Before I do that, I want you to see what's going to happen with that 0.92 in the T5007. So let's try it just as is first, and then I'm going to change it again by putting the rent assistance in. So what we should have now, no personal credit, but there is a rent credit, $525. And then we go way down to the bottom, and you're going to notice that box 14 on the T5007 is going to restrict how much he can claim, and he'll be claiming only $483 because 1 month he was receiving social assistance. That's what it looks like with social assistance. If he was also receiving rent assist, we would have to enter that in the provincial section. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to go to the provincial section. I'm going to say rent aid. Underneath home tax assist is rent aid. They're going to ask how much did he receive. Let's assume he received $700. Rent assist, whatever is on the receipt is what you're going to get. And I want you to notice what that did. It's going to take his rent credit and it's going to deduct his rent assist. And in this case, he's going to get $0. Now, it is important for you to know this. If your client received a rent assistance, you have to enter the rent assistance and you have to enter the rent that they paid. Because if they want to continue to get rent assistance, they have to prove that they were paying rent, that they received the rent assistance and they paid rent. So that's a scenario where you're going to do the data entry. Even though there's no benefit on the tax return, it's going to be a 0 at the end of the line. You have to do both of them anyway. So anyone who's receiving rent assist, we need to see their rent receipts and their rent assist receipt, and we need to enter both. That's not mentioned in the textbook. That's just something I know from working in an office in Manitoba for a long time, especially in an office that has a lot of people who have rent assist. All right, are there any questions about the property tax credit and all the things that are attached to the property tax credit? It feels like a difficult one. It's a very, very common one. We do this on almost every return we do, especially the returns we do at the beginning of the year. We have a lot of renters at the beginning of the year who are coming in specifically to get their rent credit. So we do this data entry all the time. You have to be comfortable with it if you're going to be working in an office anywhere in Manitoba. Okay, any questions beyond that? Again, there are a few tricky things. What happens to rent credit if they're in a nursing home and they want to claim some as a rent credit? There's rules for that. It's in the book. If you get anything that complicated, go find a senior associate to help you. because they'll have to determine how much to claim for the medical versus what happens to their disability amount versus what happens to their rent credit. And that one, I would say, gets complicated. I would do that with the senior associate helping you on that one. I still have students from previous years calling me when that one comes up in an office and just saying, okay, I hit this thing and there's too many things that I have to think about and I'm not sure which one to do. So if you do get one where they're in a nursing home and there's a rent portion and you want to know what to do with the rent credit, it's in the textbook, the information is there, but you might want to talk that one through with your team. Okay, just a few more, then we'll talk about the exam and then we'll take a break. So the next one that I want to talk about is the primary caregiver tax credit. And for this one, I'm just going to do it from whoever I'm in. It's a refundable credit, so it does not matter. The person you put it on is the person who's going to get it because they're the person who was doing the care. So you're going to find out who wants to receive that. You're going to go into your provincial credits. You're going to go far enough down. You're going to find down at the bottom, primary caregiver. All you need to do is enter the name of the person. And this is the crazy thing. How many days? This is because it's left over from old data entry. Several years ago, this was a different credit with a different test. You had to prorate it out based on how many days you were working. You had to do at least 90 days, and then after that, there was a whole calculation. Now, it doesn't matter. As long as they did 90 days, they're going to get the maximum. You can calculate the number of days, or if you know they're entitled to it, you can just put 365. If I do that, I'm going to go into the tax return, and I'm going to have at the end of my credits 1,400. And it's just on that line. You need to know their name because you need to make sure that they have filed an application. If they filed an application, we can put it on the return. So I would make sure you have the name in your computer, but that's all the information we need. Okay. If you're curious, you can always go down here and see what else there is. So we have now done separate residences, which deals with claiming personal credits. We have done political, we've done LSDCCs, we've done home tax assist. That's when you have received that on your property tax bill already. We have done rent aid. Some of these we're not going to do because they're not relevant to this course. They're more relevant if you're self-employed, if you're in publishing, things like that. We've done primary caregiver. You've already learned how to do other provincial credits, which are not in this section. You've learned how to do the fitness amount. You've learned how to do the arts amount. I'm going to teach you one more. And I think that's everything that I need to teach you provincially. And for this one, I'm going to go into Adam and Eve again, because I need a married couple to show you this one. We're going to talk about the fertility credit. So remember, fertility is a refundable credit. You're going to pick who you want to give it to. If I want the refundable credit to be on Adam's return, I'm going to put it on Adam's return. If I want the refundable credit to be on Eve's return, I'm going to put it on Eve's return. This is in your textbook to help you with it. Let's assume Adam wants the refundable credit because before they adopted Luke, or while they were in the process of adopting Luke, they were also incurring fertility expenses. In that case, this is a weird one. It's not in the provincial section because it's left over for some federal data entry. There used to be a federal credit, now there isn't. You can start typing the word infertility, and you're going to get infertility, or in your Smart Start, underneath your credit section, you're going to find, because it's a non-refundable credit, in this case it's a refundable credit, but it used to be a non-refundable credit federally. It's complicated. You're going to find it kind of in the middle there. I like to use my textbook to help me find this one, and then a keyword. That's how I do it. And what you're going to do is say, who is the person who received the treatment? So if Eve is the person who received the treatment, then it's going to say which expenses, and I'm going to say infertility treatment that were specific to a fertility clinic. Let's say that was $2,000. And prescriptions that are related to fertility. So it has to be prescriptions that were prescribed in Manitoba. So it's prescribed by a Manitoba doctor, and it has to be for the purpose of fertility. And in that case, let's say that was another 500. I should be checking to make sure that I've already claimed those prescriptions as a medical expense for Eve. They will be entered on Eve. This isn't going to enter it a second time for us. So that's something to think of. If you're putting prescriptions on here, make sure you've also claimed them there. They have to have been paid out of pocket. You can only do the portion that she actually paid for. If it was covered by insurance, that portion won't count. And then if I go to the tax return, I should now have an MB479 for Adam, and I'm going to have fertility, and it'll be 40%, and in this case, they'll get 1,000. If I want to give it to Eve, I would do the data entry on Eve. And again, it really should be in the provincial section, but because it was originally a federal credit, we haven't changed the data entry from when it was a federal credit. It's just only going to show up in Manitoba. So if you're in any other province, or if they were receiving treatment in any other province, you won't be able to use this. All right, any questions? So we've added some data entry that's in our province section. We've added some data entry that isn't. Your supplement will tell you where to find everything. All right, so right before we take a break, because this is the last new bit of data entry, after the break we're going to do adjustments. But for now, this is an opportunity to take a look at the TPS exam. You should have access to the TPS exam now. If you don't have access by tomorrow, send me an email so that I can follow up on that for you. I'm going to go into my transcript, and you're going to notice in your transcript you should have a section called Level 1 TPS exam. It also has a sample test. You have to finish the sample test before you access the TPS exam. The TPS exam will not give you the booklet to work on until your sample test is finished with a mark of 100. So you're going to launch the booklet and then follow the instructions and then finish the sample test. You can do the sample test as many times as you need to get it right. It's testing the same thing it was before for your theory exam and for your assignments. It's do you know the formatting they want for numbers and that kind of thing. I would do that as early as possible. Get it done now so that you can download your exam. The exam is going to come in two pieces. You're going to have a booklet, which you should launch and read in detail. You have as much time as you need to work on the booklet section. That's going to be your case or cases. So whatever we're asking you to do for the TPS exam, the instructions are in the booklet and all of the details about your client or your clients. Okay. When you're finished, the booklet will also have instructions that tell you what you need to print or have access to. If you want to work from DT Max, you can. DT Max will have all the forms that it's asking for. If you prefer to have a snapshot or a printout, if you want to actually physically print it or put it in a PDF file somewhere in case your DT Max crashes in the middle of your exam and you don't want it to do that, you can do that by printing. Okay. You may need to generate returns for dependents who aren't getting returns. It tells you how to do that. In the computer, it says use the keyword display OV. So follow the instructions. It's in the booklet as well. And then at the very bottom, it's going to have a list of pages they want you to print. Print the things they tell you to print. You will definitely be printing your notes and diagnostics. So make sure you have printed that. And you're also definitely going to be printing your keyword data. So down at the bottom, you're going to have this data used in tax calculations. And you're going to print every page you have there because it's going to tell you how many check marks you've put on the return. It's going to tell you what keywords you've used and all of that. Okay? You're going to do that for every client you have generated a return for. So in this family, I would have to do the printing if I want to print it in advance for Adam, for Eve, for Luke, and for Ruth if I'm doing a whole family. Once you have your returns done and everything printed and organized the way you want it to be organized, and you're ready to go, then you can launch the exam. The exam is timed, and it is multiple choice. It may have some filling in answers as well. And Brittany, can you have DT Max open during the exam? Yes, you can. So if you prefer to just work straight off your DT Max, you can do that. I'm not going to see what you've printed. No one's going to know how you did it. But for those of you who are nervous about having DT Max crash in the middle, you might want to just save it to a PDF so that you have a copy that you can still access in case anything goes wrong. Never hurts to have a backup. So just a quick reminder, if you're not sure, go back to the first class on DT Max. I taught everyone how to do printing in that class. But just a quick reminder, you can print to PDF by using your Save PDF. Select the things you want to print, select a place to save it, and you can save everything as a PDF. I recommend doing one per family member if you're doing a family. Have a file for each of them, and then you can open that in addition, just to have a backup. Okay. Again, all of this is going to be in the instructions in your booklet before you even run the exam. Brittany, will the exam be using anything from your practice problem clients? Nope, it will not. It will be completely fresh. That's only fair because I gave you the answers for the practice problem clients. And don't worry, we're not going to ask you the hardest TPS question we could think of. We're asking you, can you do a return that demonstrates that you have learned what we've taught you in this course? So we're not out to trick you. The deadline of the exam is in your calendar. It is December 11th. It is due at the end of the day, December 11th. So you have to have your exams registered there. You get one attempt. And Brittany, will it be like practice problem 23-2? 23-2 is difficult. I will say we're not going to test you on whether or not you can get the right answer for practice problem 23-2. I will, however, say that if you can learn how to get the answer for 23-2, you will really, really know your stuff. You will know both your theory and also your DT Max entries. So you learn a lot from figuring that one out, even if it is a frustrating one. And Helene asks, will the number of check marks and notes be marked? Yes. The number of check marks will be marked. The content of your notes will be marked. We give you marks for doing quality at source. So make sure you do quality at source. And Brittany, I promise I will do that practice problem today. I might even do it first after the break, just so that you are relieved and you have an answer. Because I know it's frustrating.
Hi all, I just want to add some like tips after I finish my level 4. There's some reminders like how to input example is 0. It's like 0.00. So, and also there's no dollar sign, and also all the decimal you should keep like at least 2 decimal. So there's a lot of rules in your booklet you need to read carefully in order to have a proper answer in the system. Yeah, you need to know that. You need to read it carefully.
Yeah, that's very helpful. And Nancy in particular, because she's just finished her own exam, has had a quick refresher of this. I haven't seen it, but I do see the instructions every year. They're very detailed. You have time to read it, however. So remember, you can access your booklet as soon as you've done the sample test. You can download your TPS booklet and spend some time reading it, because everything you need is in there, but you really do have to pay attention to the details. And that will include making sure you know what to print. It will remind you of the rules for quality at source. It's in the booklet. It tells you how to do quality at source and what they're asking for. It tells you how to do your decimal places and all of those things. It tells you not to round things. All the instructions you need are in there. All right, it is 10:15. We're going to take a 5-minute break. We're going to reset. We're going to do as many practice problems as we can get done after the break. So we're going to come back at 10:20. So this is a review just of the last one, which is Bonita White. It is practice problem 23-6. I have the answers for your file here that were sent out ahead of time. And let's jump into the textbook and take a look at the problem itself. So I'm going to jump ahead here to the very last one that we have, and we're going to refresh ourselves with the file. So we have Bonita White. On March 31st, 2021, she and her husband separated, so that they were married and now they are separated. They have been separated for long enough that they qualify. We also have Arthur, who is their son. No, Bonita and Arthur, no, they have Rosita Jones and Michael Jones. They're the children. So Michael is the son, Rosita is the daughter. Okay, we know roughly what Arthur's income was before separation. So that is the income that Arthur earned between January and March 31st, January 1st to March 31st. That information we got from Bonita. We also got his SIN number and his birth date. So they are cooperating with each other, and we have that information. We have a signed agreement, so written agreement between Arthur and Bonita that Arthur will make child support payments of $700 starting April 1st, and he has paid every single child support payment he needed to make. Bonita was staying at home. After they separated, she applied for social assistance. I want you to remember that I've added a Box 14. We're in Manitoba. We have to have a Box 14. For the summer, because she started working after that, she started working on May 1st. For the summer, she sent her children to a summer camp. This is a camp where they are staying away from home. It's the Can Olympian Summer Camp. That's going to be important in a minute. And then when the children went back to school, she asked her mother to look after them. Her mother lives on her own, is not a dependent, and she's paying her mother to look after Marita. She's paying her friend to look after Michael. So we have some child care for them. She's also been contributing to RSPs, and we have her slips. We have a T4, we have a T577. Make sure you added in the extra Box 14 that I calculated for you, which I gave you up at the top here. So we're going to add in 0.098 or 0.092 for her Box 14. That's going to be important. All right, if I do the return now, I'm going to go into Bonita White, which is under W for me. I have added the children as dependents. We should be doing an elder dependent checklist, making sure she's entitled to claim them. She is receiving child support, so he can't claim them as long as there's no other impediment. As long as they are living with her, she will be entitled to elder dependent. The computer will give her the younger child automatically. For the separation, we have to have the date of the separation added. So change of marital status, you must have entered the date when the separation started. And now we're going to use ex-spouse was a spouse in 2021 because that tells the computer that we're dealing with the year of separation. The rules are different in that year than they are for other years. And we need to have the support as well. So she is receiving child support. She's supposed to receive $6,300. She did receive $6,300. We have to enter that. It has to get onto the tax return. Okay. I did give you two possible answers. So if you did a good job, you will have given Bonita a refund of $8,142.97, and she will be very happy with you. If you did an even better job, you can give her some additional refund. You can get an amount of $8,194.97. Did anyone manage to get the higher number? Let me know in the chat window if you did. If you didn't, I'm going to show you how I did it. But I'm just curious to see if anyone figured it out. Okay, the clue was in the case, and this is where I want to remind you that you really want to read the case carefully in the same way that if you're interviewing a client, you want to think about the consequences of what they're saying. What type of camp did they go to? If it's called the Can Olympian Summer Camp, what activities are they probably doing? Active ones, fitness-related things. So because of that, remember in Manitoba we have a fitness credit. We're going to take a look at what we can do with those fees. So I'm going to go in now and I'm going to do the straightforward method where I'm going to enter in just the sports. So if I go into Rosita, I'm going to have the Can Olympian Summer Camp as a child care, limited to 4 weeks, and then I have a babysitter. And if I go into Michael, I'm going to have the same thing. Different babysitter and Can Olympian Sport Camp limited to 4 weeks. When I go to the tax return for Bonita and I go to her calendar schedule T778 form, to make this a little smaller so you can see the whole form in one page, you're going to notice that I'm only claiming 500 of each of the camps. So I have restricted, because of the child care restrictions, how much I'm claiming. That gives me room to play with the fitness amount. You have to claim it as a fitness amount first, up to what's eligible, but anything left over that can't be, as childcare, you have to claim it as childcare first. Anything that can't be claimed as childcare, we can give to the fitness amount. So what I did after I had done this, and I'm going to show you this in a plan so I get both numbers to play with, what I did was I then went in to the data entry for Rosita and I said, I have $500 to play with. I subtracted 500 from my receipt for camp and I added it in as a fitness amount, sports fitness amount 500 for Rosita, and my receipt is not double claiming. So I'm only claiming what the maximum I can for childcare, and then I have a $500 receipt. Okay. Then I go into Michael and I do the same thing. So I'm going to reduce the camp by $500 and I'm going to move that over to a fitness amount. If I do that, when I go to Bonita's file and I go into her credits, she is now going to get on her return an additional $1,000 of fitness non-refundable provincial credits. The benefit of that in her case is 15%, or no, 10.8% of that $1,000, which is going to give her a bigger refund. So if you had thought of that and you noticed it says Olympian, I'm going to ask, what are the kids doing at the camp? And she says it's a camp for sports, and they're doing all kinds of track and field events and other things, cross-country running. Maybe they're doing archery. Maybe they're doing horseback riding. It sounds active to me. I can then take that information, go on to the return, and give her a little bit more of a refund. So again, if you didn't get it, that's okay. Your client's still happy. You did a good job. But if you know your provincial credits, you could do an even better return for your clients. All right, let's look at the other questions. So, will she receive all of the estimated Canada Child benefit, or will she have to split it with her ex-spouse? What did you think? Who are the children living with throughout the year? Her. That suggests a sole custody arrangement as opposed to a shared 50-50 roughly arrangement. So she should be getting Canada Child benefit for her children. If you have a shared custody arrangement, we would talk about that with our client. What proof would you give to the CRA if they ask for it for her claim for elder dependent? Remember, it's a separation. They haven't filed anything in court. So what document might you send to prove that elder dependent amount if she gets asked to prove it? We don't want to put a claim for a lot of money on a return unless we know that we can back it up if she gets audited or if she gets a request for info. What supporting documentation should we be asking for? Any volunteers? If there's a court document, absolutely. In this case, do they have a court document? No. They have a written agreement for support. I would ask for that written agreement first. If there's something in there that says who is looking after the kids, that agreement will be enough support. If it just says he's paying amounts per month and not that she has the children, you would need additional documentation. You would need him to write a letter agreeing that she is looking after the children are with her. If he's not willing to do it, you have to go to your third-party sources. You're going to go to their school, you're going to go to their doctor, you're going to go to their pharmacist, some third-party source, a social worker, if there's a social worker involved, and get a statement from a third party saying who is demonstrably responsible for the children. One person it might be would be the neighbor, right? So he's staying at his best friend's house. The best friend's parents, who are looking after their neighbor Karen Sell, can say, I'm looking after the children after school. I'm looking after one of the children after school because they're living with their mother and they have been since this date, and that's what I understand of the situation. Those are the documents that we would need. Probably in this case, it would be in the written agreement because he wouldn't agree to pay child support payments without also agreeing that she gets to keep the children at the house with her. So that would be the first document I would look at. Good. Does she have to register the agreement for child support with the CRA? Does she have to send them that document if they don't ask for it? No. Spousal support, yes. Remember, there's a form if you are receiving spousal support you must file, or if you're paying spousal support you must file with the CRA. Child support, no. Okay. But again, if they ask for proof, you'll have to have the written agreement there. So keep that written agreement on file. Make sure she doesn't lose it. She could be asked for it at any point until the children grow up. All right. Now, if Bonita wants to claim the child care for the babysitting fees for the neighbor and for her mother, what do Marita and Karen have to do on their tax returns? They have to claim the income. So you want to make sure you have receipts before you do it, and you want to warn them because you're claiming child care, they have to report the income on their returns. So have that conversation. If they've never done this before, they don't know that they need to do that. Make sure she gives them that information. Good. And then how likely is Bonita to get a request for info from the CRA for this return? So I'm going to remind you what the return looks like. Last year, she was married with 2 kids. This year, she is claiming spousal support as income, or child support rather, as income. She is claiming child care expenses, which maybe she was claiming before or maybe she wasn't, but she's doing it now. She is claiming an elder dependent amount. She is claiming a fitness amount with that child care. What do you think? She's getting a refund of $8,194 or $8,106 or whatever it was. This is all new. She said that she's separated from her partner this year. Do you think she's likely to get a request for info, or do you think everything's going to be easy? Yeah, I think she's going to get one. Not a guarantee. She might not. She might not get it this year. She might get it 3 years from now. I would warn her. She's got a lot of things on her return that are big, big, big credits. Big credits increases the chance that she's going to get asked to prove those credits. So make sure she's aware of it so she's not stressed when it happens. Talk about how you'll deal with it if it happens, and make sure she knows the importance of keeping that documentation somewhere so that we can, we can come back and pick it up again. So if 3 years from now she gets asked for all of this stuff and she doesn't have it anymore, that's going to be a problem. Make sure she knows what to keep. And I would say the most important thing from a client perspective, let her know she can come back in and ask you for help. If she gets a letter, she's not on her own. You're her tax preparer. You're the one who put the figures on her return. You are going to help her with that process. So she has everything up to front. She doesn't have to worry when she gets that letter. Everything will be fine. All right. That was what I wanted to go over for this file. What could she do if she wants to reduce her refund next year and retain more of her income on each paycheck? Remember, next year she's probably still going to get the elder dependent amount. She's still putting into RSPs. She may not need an $8,000 refund now. She might rather have more money every paycheck. What could she do with her employer? She could file a Form TD1. Remember, the Form TD1, you can ask to have more tax deducted. You can also ask to have less tax deducted. So she can tell her employer, just so that you know, I'm a single parent, I'm going to be getting as dependent credit. Please adjust for that on my payroll. Then she'd have a lower refund next year, but every paycheck she'd have more money in the bank. So that might be a conversation. You can say, look, an $8,000 refund is great. You're probably going to get a similar refund next year. Or what we could do is reduce that refund for next year by giving you more money on every paycheck. And here's the form you take to your employer to do that, and help her fill that out. So that might be something where, as a single parent who's working and paying a babysitter, it might be better to have that money sooner rather than waiting until next tax season to get her full refund. Okay, so that was it. Are there any questions about this practice problem, this specific practice problem? Okay. She may not have filed an RC-65 with the separation. I'm guessing they did, though. Again, most of the time when people separate, they're very quick to file. If she didn't file that RC-65, it's okay because you have put the separation date in the computer. When you put a separation date in the computer, make sure it matches. So if she did file an RC-65, do that. I want to show you one other thing that is important. So in this one, I want you to notice she is getting provincial credits. The reason she's getting provincial credits is that she had a large enough family and a low enough income to qualify for a credit, $140.72. But she's not going to get the full credit because she was on social assistance. So if you put the box 14 in, it's going to give her 92% of her provincial credit. If I had not put that amount in, if I had left off the box 14, what does the computer do as a default? What number will it enter in box 14 as a default? 0. What it would do if you did that, you're going to notice that you got the wrong answer because you do not have any provincial credits. It would take the provincial credits away, and that would have cost your client, in this case, about $120. So if you want to know why you got $120 less than I did, go back in and find your box 14. It's really, really critical in Manitoba that we have that box filled in, because if we don't have that box filled in, the default position for the computer is that you receive social assistance for the whole year, and therefore you're not entitled to your personal credits because you've already gotten them as part of your social assistance. If that's not true, we can lose, in some cases, quite a bit of money for our clients. So if I put that box 14 back in, now you can see that's worth $129.46. All right, I'm going to stop the recording there. Welcome back from break. Give me a check mark. Let me know if you're back. So we're going to jump into practice problems now. I think I'm going to do them out of order a little bit. So I'm going to start with the one that I know has stressed the most people out because it stresses people out every year, which is John and Mona McKay. I'm going to do that one first. Then I'm going to go back into Chapter 22, and we're going to work through our Chapter 22 ones. And we're going to save a little bit of time at the end. I'm going to make sure we do adjustments as well at the end because I want to do that. So we're going to kind of mix it up a little bit here. Let's jump in first to our John and Mona McKay file, and I'm going to do this from our exercise, from our Inkling. So I need to find Chapter 23, which I'm in, and do a quick review. There were a few things in here you needed to notice about John and Mona. So they're both students. They got married. We're going to do a name change for Mona. She hasn't done it yet with the CRA, so she has to do it now. We know that John is a full-time student, but he is being sponsored by a local sports club. They are paying his tuition fees, and they have given him a scholarship. So we have to decide, can he claim the tuition amount? And separately, we have to decide what happens to his scholarship. And then we have some donations, and then we have Mona. Mona is a little bit more straightforward as a student, so I'm going to do her first. She paid her own tuition fees. She has a T-2202, so we know that fees are to a Canadian organization. We know that she was full-time for 8 months. She can claim the tuition amount. She can claim the textbook and education amount in Manitoba. She can claim the extra portion there. She's a qualified student in a qualified program. And we know because of her scholarship, she's a qualified student in a qualified program. Her scholarship will be exempt. So Mona will be easy to do in theory, and we'll just make sure that the computer does the right thing. John is trickier. So first question that I'm going to ask you is, can John claim his tuition credits? Remembering that he did not pay for them, he cannot claim them. If he cannot claim them, you should not enter them in the computer. So that's the first thing you might have done incorrectly. Just because you have a tax slip doesn't mean you have to enter it in the computer. If he doesn't get tuition, don't give him a tuition receipt. So that was the first thing you have to do. The tricky one is the scholarship. So on paper, it looks like he's a qualified student in a qualified program. And it certainly feels like that, and it did to me when I did this return. And then I said, there's something about not paying for your own fees. I need to look this one up. So if I go back to my theory, and I go to my chapter on students, and I take a look at definition of qualifying education program, and I am not surprised if you did not remember this, if this is your first time doing the course, I want you to notice there's a note here. The CRA has a rule that a program is not considered a qualifying or specified educational program if the student receives from a person with whom they deal in an arm's length. That means someone who's not related to them. So if you are receiving your tuition money from your parent or your spouse or your grandparent, they are not at arm's length. They are in your circle. You would give them a hug if you saw them, probably. That doesn't count. For that, you're still a qualified student in a qualified program. But if it's someone who you wouldn't naturally go up and hug, like your employer, or in this case, the sports club, they are dealing at an arm's length. If you received a grant, reimbursement benefit, or allowance for that program, then you are not in a qualifying program. If you're not in a qualifying program, you're only exempt for $500. So we have to make sure the computer makes the tuition or the scholarship have the exemption of $500. Okay, so I'm going to look at the data entry for that now. So I'm going to find my McKay file. Okay, I'm going to do Mona first because, as I said, Mona was easier. For Mona, I have a T4, I have a T4A. I have chosen 105 scholarship bursary. She's a full-time scholarship student, so she gets the full scholarship exemption. That's what it means when I use the default. And I have entered her own tuition and education amounts. She didn't have a carry forward, and we're going to leave it at that. All right, when I go to John, you're going to notice I have not entered a T2202. There is no T2202 for him, so it is not there. What I have entered here is a T4A with a box 105 scholarship from Sun Valley and a box 105 scholarship here. And what that should do, if I have done my job correctly, is when I go to the tax return, I'm going to go to his income page, and I'm going to notice that he has taxable scholarships. How much did he get? It's going to total all the scholarships together, and then it's going to give him $500 exempt. Okay. If your data entry looks like mine and you have a different number, tell me what your different number is. All right, I'm going to go back to the data entry. So for his data entry, I have a T4, I have a T4A. I have chosen box 105 because it is a scholarship. I have a T4A from Winnipeg University. I have chosen box 105 because it is a scholarship. The total for that is $12,500. The computer will give him a $500 exemption automatically. And it should work. Okay. So if you have a different number, let me know which line number is different. So we're going to check that. And let me see. So I have a balance owing of 1747.13. Let's take a look at everything that goes into that balance. There's a couple of things we want to double check. So we're going to look at income first. You should have employment income, 17,800. You should have taxable scholarship income, 12. Okay, going on to the next page, the only deduction he has is enhanced CPP. That one should be automatic if you've done your CPP entries correctly. So his taxable income is 29,728.50. He's going to get a spouse or common law partner amount. He's going to have CPP and EI and a Canada employment amount. He's going to have an amount transferred from his spouse of 5,000 federally. Okay. He's going to have donations, $88. Going down, our federal tax is 1,040.07 and our provincial is 1,657.06. So the provincial is different. We have to look at the provincial forms. All right, looking at the provincial forms, we should have personal claim. We should not have a spousal claim because her income was too high. And we should have an amount transferred from her spouse of 2,938.06. And you have a number that I don't have. What number do you have that I don't have? Okay, 58560. So that means that you must have a tuition amount for him, and you shouldn't have a tuition amount for him. So if you have an entry for 58560, it means you have data entry in tuition for him. So I want you to notice I do not have a tuition receipt entered at all. I don't have 8 months full-time. If you have no data entry, it's, as far as I know, impossible to make that happen. I'm going to ask you to send me your extract file, if you can, and I will take a look at that one for you. I don't know of any way to get your own tuition amount in without having entered a tuition amount in. Okay. There is no MBS 11 for John. You should not have an MBS 11 for John. If you have an MBS 11 for John, something has gone wrong. Yep. So your computer should not be generating that form. If it's generating that form, something happened, and we have to find out what happened. Can you confirm that it's 58560 and not 58600? Because that's the only other thing I could think of. It's not possible to have a 58560 without having an MBS 11. So I don't know how to fix it, but I will say if you send me your file, I'll probably figure it out for you. One of the things that happens with a file like this one is we do it a whole bunch of times and stuff gets in and it comes out and we add it and we take it away, and there might just be one line of data entry stuck somewhere that you're not seeing because it's collapsed or closed. So that's something to be careful. But like I said, if you've been looking at it for a week and you're still not finding it, that's what I'm there for. Send me your extract file. I will take a look at it and I will find it for you and we will get it fixed. Okay, so Helene, you don't have the right answer. Do you have the same amount transferred from spouse that I have, the 293,806? Okay, then we're going to keep going down. You should have donations of $56.40 provincially. Going to keep going down. Do you have 165706? Okay, so that's going to take us to total income tax deducted. Did you remember to put in 950? If you have the same federal tax and the same provincial tax and you have 950 and that's the only thing you have here, then you should have the same answer as me. Which is 1747. Oh, you have Canada Workers Benefit, which should not be possible because, I know what it is. You forgot to do your Canada Workers Benefit checklist. Canada Workers Benefit checklist says that you do not get Canada Workers Benefit if you were a full-time student for 13 weeks. He was a full-time student for 13 weeks. So what did we have to do? The computer gives it to him because it doesn't know that he was a student, because we didn't tell the computer he was a student the way we normally do, which is by putting in a T2202. If the computer doesn't know he's a student, we have to tell them that he's a student by overriding our Canada Workers Benefit. Like I said, this one is tricky. So if you remove the Canada Workers Benefit, hopefully you will have the right answer. And that's where your checklist is so important. Your checklist is everything. Because as you go through the checklist, it's not going to ask, did he get a tuition credit or did he have, scholarship income? It's going to ask, was he in school at this period of time? How do I remove it? You're going to go into his return. You're going to say optimize. You're going to double click, choose federal. Scroll down to the list that says Canada Workers Benefit. Click on that. And then choose do not claim. So I'm going to take this out and then I'm going to put it back in and show you. So optimize is my keyword. It's in controls, into federal. I'm going to find Canada Workers Benefit, which is most of the way down at the bottom where it says Schedule 6, say OK. Go to the next line where it says control and say do not claim. And that will take my Canada Workers Benefit out because he's not entitled to it. Did we do it? Yeah. If you found this one easy, you should feel comfortable teaching this course. This is not an easy problem. But if you're going slowly down line by line and you're going each of these lines, does this make sense to me? You need to know the theory. If you know the theory, the data entry is just a question of getting the computer to do what you want it to do. Good. So I want to make sure we all had a chance to look at that one because I know it's been stressing everybody out. Can I do the control one more time? Absolutely, I can do the control one more time. And I want to remind you, in your textbook, there is an appendix that teaches you how to do controls. It teaches you how to do optimize and how to do transfer and when to do them and why you do them and how they work. I really like that appendix. I recommend you take a look at that in the next week if you haven't done that yet. So controls, keyword is optimize. In this case, it's optimize that we're doing. I double click on optimize. It's going to open up and I'm going to say federal or provincial. I can pick. I'm looking to optimize a federal refundable credit. So I'm going to say Canada Workers Benefit, which is most of the way down the list. I'm going to say OK. I go down to the next line, which is the control line. I have to put something in that line or I have a warning. And I'm going to say do not claim because he's not entitled to the Canada Workers Benefit. Our checklist says he doesn't get it, so we're going to remove it from his return. Excellent. Now I had a couple of questions. Yep, send it anyway. I'm always happy to look at it to make sure everything is where it should be. So, a couple of questions they had. Both John and Mona were expecting refunds this year. Can you explain to John why he owes money this year? What is the thing that is causing him to owe money? It's because his tuition isn't exempt. He got a benefit from his employer. That benefit means the scholarship is not tax-free. He doesn't get Canada Workers Benefit. He doesn't get tuition credits. What he did get is a whole bunch of free tuition, which is great, and some scholarships, which is great. It's just not tax-free scholarships for him. So that's the conversation you're going to have. If he's going to have the same thing happen next year, you can help him do some tax planning and say, next year, what are we going to do with this? Plan ahead, put some extra money aside you know you're going to owe next year again. Excellent. Now, my other question was, Mona has automatically transferred her tuition to John. What could she have done instead? They're joined, so the computer did it for us. We didn't ask it to, it just did it. She could carry it forward if she wants to. So she's giving up $5,000 of her own tuition credits to John. She might not want to do that. It's up to her. Now, absolutely, if I overrid that, he would owe more. But it's her decision to make, not his decision. You should have that conversation with her. Maybe there's a reason why she's going to need it in 3 years. Maybe she's in medical school in 3 years from now. She's going to make a lot more money. And as a family, it'll be better to have that credit later as opposed to now. Maybe not. Remember, it's her money. It's her tax return. They're joined in the computer, and he's the family head in the computer, but that's just in order to make things happen without me having to do extra data entry. In real life, they are two separate returns. She's an individual in her own right. Have a conversation with her. If she doesn't want to transfer, she doesn't have to. She might not want to transfer all of it. She might just want to transfer some. So you can decide how much she wants to transfer, and then you can optimize it. All right, what notes do I have for John? Good question. Because we're doing balance owing, it's good to have that. So the first thing I would say is I have for John, sorry, I'm going to go into his. This is where knowing if it's pink and blue is helpful. I have a whole bunch of taxable scholarship income, which is the main reason he owes money. That's pretty much my note. So my note is taxable scholarship income because his employer paid for tuition. I made a second note, which was optional. For me, I wanted to explain why I didn't enter his T2202. It downloaded, and I didn't put it in the computer, so I want to explain that. If I go back to this file, I don't think I forgot to put it in. I have a reason why I didn't put it there. Because I'll tell you, 4 years from now, if he comes back and he says, I never claimed my tuition in that year and I really wanted to, when he comes back 4 years from now, I'm not going to remember why I didn't claim it. He's not going to remember that his employer paid for it or that we had a conversation. So when I go back into that file and I go, oh, I must have missed it, I go back into the file, the first page I look at is Notes from Diagnostics, and I go, this is why. Here's the reason you didn't get Canada Workers Benefit. Here's the reason I didn't put your tuition in. Here's why your scholarship income was taxable. We figured all this out 4 years ago, and your return was done correctly. So that's my thing that I would do. We're not going to mark you on that, but the balance owing, that one note is worth a mark. All right, any other questions about this one? So Mona had a note as well. Mona's note, if I go into mine to explain hers, she had a refund over $500. All of her income was below the basic personal amount. All of her taxable income was below the basic personal amount. So any tax she had withheld was refunded. Maurice, the tax slip doesn't have an amount to enter tuition. I'm not sure what you mean by that. If you could clarify the question. There were no numbers. Is that in the problem? there should have been numbers. If I go into this one, 23.2. So John had a T20 2022. Oh, eligible tuition fees was 0. Yeah, they didn't bother writing it in because you were supposed to know that you're not claiming it. It's possible the university would do that if they knew who was paying the fees, but realistically, most universities don't know who's paying the fees and they don't care and they don't ask. So that was a little hint for you that you didn't need to put it in. But yeah, I didn't notice that actually when I was doing it because as soon as I looked at the slip, I knew I wasn't going to be using it. So I didn't need to know what was on it. It wasn't going to go anywhere. The only thing I did need to know was how many weeks. So I did look at that number. All right. Good. In real life, it probably would have had numbers. Yeah. And Brittany, not everything else was very wrong. It was mostly right. It's the Canada Workers Benefit. So again, I cannot stress enough, if you're giving your client a Canada Workers Benefit, use your checklist. Because it will catch the thing that the computer didn't know about and that you forgot. And if I had not done my Canada Workers Benefit, I might have missed that one too. So I do my Canada Workers Benefit checklist every time I see Canada Workers Benefit on a return, just to be careful. All right, I'm going to go back now, and we're going to go into our Chapter 22. So we've done Claudia. We used it in class. Just want a quick note here. For Claudia, we had some additional information, so I'm going to go there, and I'm going to pull up her file as well. And again, unless you had a specific question, I'm probably just going to go over what I want to review. But if there's something you want to look at to troubleshoot just like we did, we'll go over that together. All right, so Claudia was going to school and she wants to transfer it to her parents, and she had some work and she had a scholarship and she was 4 months full time. So mostly for Claudia's, what I wanted you to double check was that you entered the T4 slip, because some people will think if you don't need it. Oh, is that the wrong one? Claudia Erickson is 22-1. Yeah. So for Claudia, I wanted to make sure that you had entered the T4A and then made it exempt. So what we can do is if I look at her tax return, you're going to notice there's nothing on line 13010, but if I go to the worksheet, it's going to say that she had an exemption. I have entered the T4A. If you don't enter the T4A, the CRA can very helpfully add it in for you. And you don't want it adding it in as taxable income. You want to make sure you say, yes, I noticed the T4A slip. I have thought about it. The other things that I wanted you to note on that one, she wanted to do the transfer to her parents. We're not going to connect the parents to a file because we don't have their permission to do that. And she's a dependent. We would have to clone in order to do that, which is not ideal. So all I have to do there is I'm going to transfer to parent not processed, and I'm going to transfer the amount that I want to choose. Okay. In this case, she's going to transfer 5,000 federal. She's going to transfer the same provincial. What documentation would I need to have in my file before I do that transfer? I need a Schedule 11, which the computer will generate, but that's not the documentation. How do I prove the transfer? Because the CRA will ask me to prove it. I need the T2202, and I need the back of it, and I need it signed and completely filled in. So she's going to decide which parent to give it to. She's going to fill it out. She's going to put the numbers in, and she's going to sign it. Then you're going to make a copy of that. You're going to put it in her file, and you're going to make a second copy and give it to her parents because they're going to need it. Whoever's claiming it will need a copy as well. then you're going to warn them they're going to get a request for info at some point in the next couple of years, and they should not ignore it, because if they ignore it, they're going to create a really messy adjustment that we have to fix. So data entry, transfer to parent not process is the correct way of doing that one. And then, of course, we have now added things to it, so our final answer is going to be different. Now I'm going to go back into my file here. I'm going to look at the next one. This one was Matthew Collins. He's a divorced father. He lives alone with his son, Alex. He has full custody. He does not receive any support payments. Alex is an active soccer player. He went to Mountain Lake Summer Camp with his club for 6 weeks. He also has an RSP account. We have information there. He forgot an RSP receipt for 2021. What should we do with that? Didn't claim it before. We can't add it now. What should we do? T1 adjustment. I'd like to say very carefully here, do not enter it in the memo field. That will make this ineligible for e-file. So if you enter it in the memo field, you can cause an e-file error where you don't want one. That memo field has a specific purpose, which is when we're doing early spousal withdrawal, and some fixes for transfers specifically from a retiring allowance. Those are the only times you're going to use that memo field. The rest of the time, it has to be blank. Right? We have a home buyer plan. He needs to make a repayment. Right? He borrowed money, so we're going to have some carrying charges. This was more of a summary one. I'd like to remind everyone there were some management fees as well. If we did his return correctly, you should have gotten a refund. Now, you could get two answers. The official answer for the course is $909.30. If you got that, good job. Your client is happy. If you really, really know your provincial information, you can do better. You can give him $963.30. So my question for you is, how did you do that? Did anyone get the better result? And if you did, what did you think about? Marisa, you did good job. What was the trick to go from a good return to a better return? It is the fitness amount. The clue is in the wording. So he went to a camp. What type of camp was it? It was soccer camp. Soccer camp qualifies for the fitness amount. You have to use the child care portion first, but if there's something left over, you can do a fitness amount. So that's what you could have done. And if you did that, the data entry, you have to be careful not to double claim things. If you did it the regular way, it's just $1,800. If you got the better answer, you're going to take $500 off the camp after you've checked to make sure that you're getting the maximum child care first, and then you can claim the $500 as a fitness amount. So that's super advanced provincial knowledge. We're not going to test you on anything provincial for the exam, but in real life, this is how you get your clients to come back to you year after year after year, because everybody else, they do their own using tax software, and then you give them more money. This is how we do it. Right? Couple more questions. Why wasn't his refund as high as you might expect for someone with an elder dependent? So Helene, if you split it differently, it's not wrong, but I would say this version of splitting it is the safer version of splitting it. And that just comes from experience, from having done it. What I always do is see how much is being used for childcare first, find out how much is left over up to $500, take that amount off the childcare, and put the remainder on the fitness. If you do it in the other direction, you claim the $500 in another way. If you split it 50-50 or however you're going to do it, you can sometimes, if you're not being careful, underclaim the child care amount, and that causes problems. So just as a best practices, look at the return, see how much buffer you have, and then take the minimum off for the fitness amount. So my question was, why is he getting less refund than normally you would? And the answer is because he had lots of other sources of income. So he had some non-taxable, certain taxable income that did not have tax withheld from it. So that's the reason he's getting slightly smaller than we might expect, but still a good refund. Good. We talked about the RSP. He can do an adjustment for that. We're going to do adjustments today before we leave. I'm going to make sure you know how to do adjustments. What advice might you give him next year to improve his refund? So again, I'm going to go in here. I'm going to take a look at all the different sources of income that he has. He's already paying into RSPs. He might want to contribute more. I'm going to take a look at those investments and see, is there anything in there that could be sheltered? Is there any way of getting that income off his return? So look at that as well. And he could have more taken off at source, or he could just prepay his own refund. He could decide he wants to save and put some money aside. It's also helpful in a case like this to take a look at what he's getting that's not on a tax return. So he's going to see his refund and go, that's not a very big refund. That's true. It's about what it was last year, but it's actually more because last year his climate action incentive was included in it. This year, he's also going to get climate action incentive, and he's going to get some Canada Child Benefit. So when you add all of that all together, that's also beneficial to him as a single parent. So it's always good to look at the whole return and see what they're going to get, not just from filing for the refund or balance owing, but also the additional benefits. Okay, good. We have Jenny next, so I'm going to take a look at Jenny. So Jenny is enrolled in university. She's living in residence during the semester. We now have a residency issue. We need to know what her province of residence is. In this case, what's her province of residence going to be? It's Manitoba because she doesn't have a home anywhere. And if she hasn't got a home anywhere, we look at where her ties are. So we're going to look at things like, where is her stuff? Where is her income coming from? Where's her driver's license? And if none of that answers the question, maybe she's a student who doesn't drive and she doesn't have any stuff yet because it all belongs to her parents. If she has no other solution, it's going to be the last place she was. But you have to think, when you have students, think about residence. So in this case, Manitoba still. All right, and we had some provincial carry forwards and some federal carry forwards. She wants to transfer to her mother. We're not going to join them. We don't have permission from her mother to do a return for her, so we're stuck with doing just Jenny's. We're going to be using our transfer to parent not processed. We have a T4, we have a T2202. You should have made a note of these amounts because we're going to need those for future problems. So I put them in the book. Okay, and I'm going to go to my questions now. For Jenny, why is she not getting Canada Workers Benefit? She has low income. She's a full-time student. And the question there is, how did the computer know that she was a full-time student? Because we didn't have to do an override or an optimize in this point. In this case, we told the computer she was a full-time student when we entered the T2202. So that already has told the computer she's a full-time student. It will override that. And then if we added a eligible dependent and made her a single parent, it would give it back to her. You still need to do the checklist. All right. And what was the next question I had? What documentation does she need? T2202. If she had been in a different province, we would have to be more careful. So if she had been resident in a different province and now she's filing as a Manitoba resident, we would have to think about that provincial carry forward, and we might have to change that. Or if she's in Manitoba, but her mother, who she wants to transfer it to, is in a different province, we have to think about how much she can transfer provincially. Federally, we don't have to mess around with it, but provincially, we have to think about it. And you're going to go back to your supplement for that, or to your, I think Facts and Figures is the book that has the tuition. And Helene, you have a different amount for your provincial transfer limit. Let's take a look. I might have messed with this one as well, so I'll double check it. So we had a carry forward amount provincially, 6,000 new tuition plus 8 months full time gives us 9,200 new credits to play with this year. Her income was 10,801.02, so she needs to use a small amount. She needs to, well, a large amount actually, $4,290.22 is necessary for her to claim this year. So she's going to have a credit of $746.76 on her return. And then available to claim, 5,000 minus that is 4,253.24 is the maximum she can transfer. So that's what we should put for our provincial transfer limit. If you have a different number, let me know which of those numbers is different, and it should be one of the ones on this page that would be different. Because lots of things could make this different. It could be the number of months full time. It could be oh, the answer has 4290.22. I may have written the wrong one down. I did write the wrong one down. Yep. So what it should be, I apologize, is 4253.24. So if you had 4253.24, you got the right answer. Did I put the wrong one in here? I put the right one in my textbook. Okay, so that's fixed. And this is why we ask these questions. I will update that as well. All right. And on to the next one. We have Bob. Bob was married to Carol until their divorce in 2016. They have a son named Fred, who was born on March 8th. Fred lives with his mother, suggesting that his mother has custody, maybe shared custody, but he is the one paying child support and he is paying spousal support. He did miss a December payment. Fred moves in with Bob for 6 weeks every summer. He had to pay for childcare. So we're going to be adding Fred as dependent, but we have to decide what type of dependent he's going to be. Then we had some donations, and we had a T4 slip, and we're going to do Bob's return. So the main thing that I want you to notice is he doesn't have custody. He just has the child for 6 weeks. So he is going to be the easiest form of removing him as a dependent. We're going to say on Fred's file, transfer OV not a dependent child. Otherwise, we have to go in and change every single line, which is not ideal. We don't want to have to go in and change multiple things if we can do it all with one single piece of data entry. So in this case, we're going to add him because we're going to be doing childcare. He is eligible to claim childcare for his child because he had to pay for childcare while his child was with him. Okay, so you have to say on Fred's return, transfer OV not a dependent child. If you just make him not a dependent, not an eligible dependent, it may give him other claims that he's not entitled to, particularly provincially. So again, you would have to go in and you would say, but he doesn't qualify as a dependent for this credit, and he doesn't qualify as a dependent for that credit. He doesn't qualify if you get Canada Workers Benefit. You'd have to override that. So if you know you're overriding everything, just override everything. or you're going to get the wrong numbers. This is very common when it is not a typical shared custody situation, when one parent has sole custody, they make all the decisions for the child, they are the person receiving support, and the child is just with the other parent for short periods of time, for a vacation and things like that. It's becoming less common. Okay, so a couple things to check here. Total amount of support payments is what he actually paid. So that's how much he paid per month times 11 months because he missed one payment. Amount of support he should have paid for child support is 12 months of child support. So that's where those numbers came from if you didn't get the same thing as me. And then everything else should have been fairly straightforward. If you did the return correctly, you're going to notice that when you get to your Manitoba Climate Action Incentive, you're not going to be claiming him there. You're not trying to claim him there because you shouldn't be trying to claim him there. He's not entitled to it. You're going to notice that there's no Canada Child Benefit because Fred's mother will be receiving the Canada Child Benefit. It's not a 50-50 split. But you are going to get child care expenses. You must have the SIN number. If the SIN number is not there, they will not allow the child care expenses. When it's a babysitter, you have to have a SIN number, and it should be nice and straightforward. Additional questions? If he catches up on his support payments next year, when will he be able to deduct the additional spousal support that he paid? So next year, instead of paying 12 months, he's going to pay 13 months. Next year, he will get the additional spousal support. And the way that would look in the data entry next year is you're just going to take this, multiply by 13 months is what he actually paid, and then the required payment will be the same, and the computer will give him a bigger spousal deduction. So the tricky one there is making sure that you're reporting the total that he actually paid next year and make sure he gets credit for the spousal amount. It can be a little fussy, but if he paid the child support back, that's going to go into the total, but you don't want the child support to end up being a deduction. So you're going to have to say how many months he actually paid child support for so that you get the right number. So that's one that I would do on paper before I would do it there. And Helene, if your override did not eliminate the CCB, I would say again, just double check which override you did. If you said not a dependent child, I think it doesn't give you a child amount. So you'll notice on my summary, I don't have a CCB. If you have a CCB, double check your data entry for Fred. So what does it look like for Fred? Transfer OV, not a dependent child. One single line to make that happen. Okay, are there any more questions about these ones? I'm going to do Jackie next. Then I'm going to go on and do some of our final chapter as well. So let's take a look at Jackie Mitchell. I go to the practice problem here. We have a single parent. Again, I apologize. I had a typo. I did my practice problem at about 1 o'clock in the morning, which is always a bad idea. And I had entered Emily's birth date as September 28, 2021, when it should have been 2008. Did not change the tax return, but it did change Canada Child Benefit, and it would have caused a problem for my client if I had filed it that way. Now, in an actual office setting, I would have verified that with the parent before I filed the return, make sure the birth date was right. and I would have verified the Canada Child Benefit as well. So I would have caught it, but I should have caught it this time as well, because that's what quality at source is for. So all I can say is this is why we do quality at source. It's the type of mistake that gets in where everything looks like it makes sense, and then there's one number that seems like it's too much. So we have Jackie. Jackie and her sister Marianne, who is a single parent, share a house. Marianne has already filed her return, and she's claiming ELS dependent. So that means Jackie can't have an ELS dependent. Everything else, yes, but ELS dependent, no. We're going to have to optimize or transfer that one. This is transfer OV. Okay. We also have some RSTs, and we have some medical bills. I want you to notice there's a bill for Emily. You should enter your medical on the person for whom the medical expense was created. So if it's Emily's braces, it should be on Emily's data entry. And then we have some T5s as well. So I'm going to go into Jackie here. Make sure you've entered the support. Ask your clients if they are receiving support, because it is a necessary reporting number. It's not going to affect your tax return, but it's an incorrect return if you don't include it. And then for Emily, had the tricky things here. Amount for ELS dependent, transfer OV. In this case, we're not going to say that she's not a dependent child. She is a dependent child for everything else. We just can't claim ELS dependent this year. What advice would we give for next year? So this year, Marianne got a nice big tax credit and Jackie didn't. What advice might we give Jackie for next year if they're still living together? Discuss the ELS dependent credit. Decide who's going to get it. Or if Marianne is getting a big ELS dependent credit, she can contribute to the household a little bit extra and use some of that refund to help out, because Jackie can't get it if her sister is getting it. So it's a conversation they can have between the two of them. Okay. Other questions that I wanted answered on this one? On whose data entry did enter the medical expenses and who can claim ELS dependent next year? The quick answer is the first person to file can claim it next year, but they really should coordinate between the two of them. All right. We're going to take another short break, just a 5-minute break. We're going to jump in. We're going to do our last set of practice problems. And when I do that one, when we get to the adjustment, I'm going to teach you adjustments at the same time. I may do that out of order. We're going to see. I want to make sure I get that in detail. So take a 5-minute break, come back at, I'm going to say 11:16, and we will finish up this chapter and the whole course. Welcome back. Last big push, last break of the tax course, so that's exciting. Did want to say, just so that you know, I'm going to try very hard to finish everything today. If I don't, I will make sure to record whichever ones I didn't get done in my next class, so that you'll have the recordings before the TPS exam. After the TPS exam, we have a class. The class is there as a review class, so I will be reviewing the TPS exam, the answers, going through everything if you have questions. The other thing I'm going to do at that class, if you're interested in coming to that one, we have just received, those of us who are still working in an office recently, a set of tax updates for what we are expecting, what we know for a fact is going to change for next year, and some more details about how some of those changes are going to work. So I want to make sure I have time to do that. I didn't want to confuse you by giving it to you now, because it's not going to change. We're doing 2021 returns for the course. But if we had questions, I've been saying we don't know what's going to happen for 2022. I now have some updates, so I will put together some information about that, and I will include that in the review class. The review class will not be recorded. So anything, this is our last recording. Anything that happens in the review class will not be recorded, because of course this is going to get posted and some people will have their exams in a week or two. We're the first class that's going. So if you do have any questions, theory questions, TPS questions, questions about working at H&R Block, anything about marks, all of those things, or if you just want to get that information about updates for next year, you can come to that class, which will be our final one. All right, let's jump into the last section here, and I'm going to do these out of order. We do have the Sandra Williams-Smith file. I will come back to that one if we have time. I want to do the Christine and Peter Lee file because we're going to do the file first, and then we're going to do the adjustment, and I will teach you how to do adjustments as we go over the review so we can kind of get it all done at once. I hope you did that one in advance because you're going to need the numbers in order to know what to put in your adjustment. And Karina just confirming, yes, a review class, so it's going to be the day after the exam. The exam for you is due Sunday night, which is December 11th, and we will have a review class Monday, December 12th. All right, let's take a look at our Chapter 23 practice problems. So I'm going to jump ahead and we're going to go and look at Chapter 23.3. So here we have Christine and Peter. Christine is the mother of Jenny. Jenny really liked what we did for her and referred her mother and her grandfather to us as clients. So Christine has been a widow for many years. After the death of her husband, she has been looking after her daughter. She is receiving a transfer from her daughter. She also supports her father-in-law, Peter, who is widowed and lives in her home. As soon as you say father-in-law or father and lives in the home, I start thinking about the possibility of caregiver amounts, of disability transfers if he has a disability, dependent credits, anything along those lines. So we want to think about, is this something where we're going to create a merged file? Again, we are going to create a file for Christine with Peter as a dependent. We're not going to clone Jenny into that file. We don't need to do that. We can use our transfer to parent not processed. We don't need to do anything extra. So we're just going to create a file for Christine with a dependent for Peter. Peter has been claiming the disability amount. He's never been claimed on Christine's return before, but his friends suggested he should think about it. He doesn't know what that's like, and we're going to help him with it. So we're going to have her income. We're going to have his income. I want you to notice that his income is not very high. He has some pension income. He has some OAS. He has some CPP and a survivor benefit as well. So CPP for himself and CPP from his spouse, who also died. So we get a lot of information just from the tax slips. Okay, I'm going to show you the files that I have set up. You're going to notice I have Christine as the family head, and I have Peter as a dependent. When I go into Peter's file, I'm going to include the fact that he's her father. There isn't a drop-down box for father-in-law because father means father by birth or marriage or any other relationship that has been created that makes a father relationship. So this is a reminder all the way back to the first theory class we had on dependence. If we had a scenario where you have someone who is a niece or a nephew, but because they were in your care, custody, and control before they turned 18, you want to make sure that you tell the computer that that is not a nephew relationship, it's a child relationship or a father-child relationship, because that's going to change what the computer can do for dependent credits. So things where a nephew does not qualify, but a son does, or a daughter doesn't qualify, or a niece doesn't qualify, but a daughter does, you want to make sure you've told the computer which relationship you're talking about. Okay, in this case, it's going to be father of. I'm going to put the infirmity, which is the disability amount, and I'm going to leave it at that because he is entitled to disability credit. And then I'm going to put in all of his information. You're going to notice he's got 3 tax slips, so we're going to do 3 check marks. Just a quick reminder about quality at source there. For Christine, we're going to have her information here, and then we need to do Jenny and Jenny's transfer. So I got Jenny's transfer amount provincially from her return. In real life, I got that from the back of her T2202 because remember I said when we did that file that she has to fill it in and sign it and give it to them. This is why she gives it to them, so that I can take the number that is on the form that has the signature on it. All right, we're going to transfer the full federal amount and the portion of the provincial. You would have had to have filled in all of this information. The good news is all of it would be on the T2202 except for the birth date, and Christine probably knows the birth date of her daughter. So we can get that information from her. We don't have to go into Jenny's file, but Jenny is a client and she's referred her parents to us, so we can probably also get her permission if we need that to look at her file. All right, when I go into the return, I want you to notice I gave you the instructions, do the disability transfer, let the computer make the transfer happen. In real life, what should I warn the client about? If I'm going to do a disability transfer for the first time, what do I have to be careful about? So this is from my note up here. I want to make sure it's on file with the CRA. If it's not, it can delay the processing of that return because they're going to look at it and go, we don't have a T2201 on file, so we need to find out whether or not you are an appropriate person to receive that transfer. Some of that information they have made simpler. So if we were having this conversation a couple of years ago, I would have told you, don't do it this way. File it without, and then do an adjustment with all the information, because we would have to wait for that adjustment to go through, and there would be a delay, and it would take about the same amount of time that it takes to process the whole disability certificate itself. That is changing. So the nice thing is, and this is still fairly recent, they have changed the requirements. You no longer have to file a complete adjustment in order to make this happen. You just have to send them a written letter. I would get both Peter and Christine to sign it. Christine to say, I am supporting him financially. He is living in my house, so I provide his shelter. And that has happened since whatever date. You're going to pick the date that started happening. And then you're going to have Peter write on that and say, I would like to transfer any available unused disability amount to Christine for all the years that I'm not using it. That should be enough because they are living together in the same house, and it is the house that Christine owns. In that case, it should be enough for them to quickly put the transfer on RepaClient. You might even be able to get them to do it over the phone, and it can take just 2 or 3 days for them to process it, or you can submit it online now. You can send that letter in, and it will get processed fairly quickly. So unless there's an urgent reason why they need an immediate notice of assessment right away for Christine, we don't have to rule out Peter. His file will be processed. He has a disability certificate on file. But if Christine needs her figures immediately, you want to make sure that you can get that transfer on her file first, but you might be able to do that quickly now. If she doesn't need it right away, it's probably not going to be as long a delay as it used to be. Again, this is fairly new. So you can complete the return for the disability transfer even if it's not on file with the CRA, but you do have to warn her that there's some additional documentation we have to send to make that happen quickly, and let her know that there can be a delay. Okay, are there any questions about that? So again, if it had been a couple years ago, I would have overridden the disability transfer and claimed it without, and then done an adjustment with all of the paperwork. Now they've made it a little bit easier. Okay. I want you to think about everything Christine is claiming that she probably didn't claim before. So the easy one is the one we've talked about, which is the disability transfer. What else might she be claiming for Peter that she didn't claim in other years because she didn't know she could? Caregiver. So I hope you thought about that. If I'm doing caregiver, you will have completed a Schedule 5. And on that Schedule 5, you're going to have Peter as an eligible dependent because he qualifies as an eligible dependent. Unfortunately, his income is too high to give her an eligible dependent amount, but that takes us into the next step, which is the top-up. So you're going to find in 2021, she is going to get a caregiver, and we don't have to do any extra documentation for that. So don't mix that up with the disability credit. She can claim that on the return without there being any delays at all. And then the disability one, we're going to have a conversation about how she wants to do that one. Okay, data entry wise, fairly straightforward. If you have any questions, let me know. But what I would like to do next is talk about 2020. So we got some instructions for 23-4 that said, think about 2020. And what I hope you did is calculated the disability transfer and the caregiver amount, because if we're doing an adjustment, we're going to do one adjustment. So I would do this adjustment after the disability transfer had been approved, but in the case it says that that happened, so we have gotten approval. It's now on the file that says she can receive it, says she can go back to 2020. So we're going to take that document from the CRA, we're going to save that in a PDF, then we're going to generate everything we need to generate now. So what I did was I did a little spreadsheet for myself, and I can show you what it looks like. It's going to be super messy. You can do this using fillable forms. I recommend the fillable forms because you're going to need them anyway, and we're not going to open and create an entire 2020 file if we don't need to. We're just going to do the forms we need, and the forms we need are the Schedule 5 and the worksheet for the transfer. So federal, straightforward for 2020, you're going to find out that she can transfer all of the disability amount federally. Provincially, we have to find out whether or not she can transfer the disability amount, and the answer provincially is no. In 2020, his income was too high. She's not going to get a disability transfer provincially. So we're only going to be amending the federal line. And then if you were really, really catching everything that you could do, you also would have done a Schedule 5, federal Schedule 5, amount for eligible dependent is 0. You have to fill this form in because we're going to use this form. And then top up is 1755. And again, if you go over and you look provincially, there will not be a provincial caregiver amount because his income was too high. So the good news is in Manitoba, we're only doing federal adjustments. The bad news is we're doing 2 of them, not 1. And you have to have done some forms by hand to get it. Okay, are there any questions about that? All right, how did I get those numbers? The way that I get the numbers is I use my fillable forms and I just follow it through because it is difficult to know what the income amounts are and where the thresholds are, and you're using previous years. So this is where you want to go back into the CRA and find your old years. Make sure you're using 2020 forms. If you're using 2020 forms, they're going to ask a couple of questions. For the Schedule 5, it's easy because you take the basic personal amount, which you're going to get from, this is Marisa's, or sorry, you're Marisa. This is Christine's basic personal amount. Caregiver is from the form, and then subtract his income, which is straightforward. Okay. You have to do the forms because they have to be attached to the T1 adjustment, so you need to have the forms done. The calculations, I'm going to show you from the book how we would do the calculations for the disability transfer. So the way that it worked was they have told you the basic personal amount, they have told you the age amount, they've told you the pension income amount, and the disability amount. And what you're going to do to find out what he can transfer is you're going to take those and subtract them from his income and see what's left over. So again, that's where I went into my little spreadsheet, and we have the disability amount plus all of these gives us 31,442. His net income is 22,606, and that leaves 8,836 unused out of everything that could be transferred. And because the last thing that we transfer is the disability amount, it means we can transfer the full disability amount. Okay. So that's one where you really need to sit down and take a look at it. Once we've done that, then we can figure out which entries we're going to change. Now I'm going to show you 2 things in the computer for this. If we're changing a tax year that we already have the information for, I'm going to show you that first because there's a really neat thing we have in our system called a plan. And a lot of associates don't know about this, but it's really, really useful. You have seen me use it really, really quickly, but I'm going to show you how to do it yourself now. So let's assume for now that we have done this file and we did not do something. We missed something that we should have added in. We filed the return, it's finished, we're set up in our program. What I would do in real life at this point is I would print out my tax return summary. Let's say I'm adjusting Christine's return. I would print out the summary. And that's going to give me all of these numbers here. Then I can go in and say, what did I forget? What if the thing that I forgot was some union dues for Christine? I want to find out which numbers are different, but I don't want to change what we actually filed. So for this, we're going to go in and we're going to do what's called a plan. Up at the top where we have production, production is everything that goes to the CRA. This is what we have filed with the CRA. If I want to play around with the numbers, and I might do this for an adjustment, I might do this for an estimate. If a client says, if I bought $5,000 RSP, what would that look like on my return this year? I don't want to change the return this year because I might forget to take it out again. I want to give them some numbers I can play with. I'm going to go and do a plan. So you're going to do a drop-down box, and you're going to pick the first one you find. You're going to have up to the letter F is the number of plans you can make. We usually don't need to make that many. I'm going to say plan A. So again, I'm going to go up to production. So we've used the right side before. Now we're using the left side. I'm going to do the drop-down box and choose a plan A. Then I'm going to say copy everything from production. I want to keep everything I already have. Never copy a blank one. You have to redo all your data entry, and it's a real pain. So I'm just going to say copy everything that I already did, and I'm going to say OK. Now I'm going to go into my accountant section, and there's a thing called plan title, and I'm going to say, what am I changing so that I can keep track? If I'm doing this for an adjustment, I want to say T1 ADJ for union dues. If I'm doing it for an estimate, I will say estimate of RSPs. Whatever it is that I'm changing, I'm going to label that plan. Then when I go back and forth, I'm going to go into production. The next time I look at it, I'm going to know why I made a plan. I didn't know about this for a long time until I finally read my textbook really carefully and found this little thing. And that means if I'm coming back and looking at the file 2 or 3 years later and someone has done 4 adjustments, I can go see what was originally filed, what the first adjustment looked like, what the second adjustment looked like. I can see all the changes as if it was done in order, which is really nice. So again, I'm going to pick my plan A, which I know is for union dues. Then I can go in and change whatever I want to change. So I can go in here and I can say I need to add some dues, and I need to add regular union dues, and I need to do $600, whatever they were, name of union, whatever it was. Now I can go to the tax return, and it's going to give me a new refund. It's going to change as many numbers as it needs to change. I can then print this, and I can compare it to my old one, and that tells me what line numbers I need to use for my adjustment. I want you to notice this will only show you on the summary the federal ones. So if you want the provincial forms, you have to print the provincial forms. So I could then, if I want a printed copy, print the plan of the provincial forms. And you're going to notice the version is up at the top here. So it's going to tell me I'm in a plan now. And I should be able to see a planning summary. Now I'm going to tell you the planning summary is a little finicky with the student version. So I'm going to see if I can get it to work. If I go into production and I go into my planning summary here, is it going to give it to me? It's probably not going to work the way that I want it to work. But in a real office, I would have the production on the left side and all the different plans on the right side, and I could see a summary on one page, which is really handy. It's just not very effective on the student version. But I can always tell which one I'm looking at. Once I know which line numbers I'm going to change, then I'm going to go back to my data entry and I'm going to do a T180J. Anytime you're changing something from what was originally filed, you should use a plan. Anytime you're doing an estimate for something that you don't want to actually change the numbers, you should use a plan for that. And then to switch back and forth between the production and the plan, you go back to your data entry and you just go back to the first one you wanted. Before you e-file, double check to make sure you're on production so that you're actually sending what you think you're sending. Okay. Are there any questions about plans before I do the actual adjustment itself? It's something I recommend experimenting with. I find it incredibly useful. And again, especially if you have to go back and you've done old year returns and you already have the data, it's a really nice way of doing the adjustment without having to calculate everything by hand without messing up the data you already have. So you don't want to put something in and then forget how to switch it back. All right, Helene, you have a question about Peter? This is a good time to ask. What is your question about Peter? Line 61470, what should that be? Is that on Peter's return? Family tax benefit for Peter should be $4,729.50. Where I got that from, he is entitled to the basic amount for himself, the age amount for himself, the disability amount for himself, as reduced by 9% of his income. So if you got his income right and you had the disability in there and his age, you should get the right number. Good. All right. So that's what we do if we have all the information already in our computer. If we don't have the information in our computer, we have to do everything we're going to do by hand. So all the calculations that I asked you to do by hand, that's what we would do in an office. We're not going to, again, we're not going to create a file for an old year just to do an adjustment. That's a lot of work and it's not necessary. So if we're doing a 2021, we would do it by hand, and then so that we have a record in the computer, and in case we're going to file it by paper. So those are the two reasons we do it. We have to generate the forms to submit to the CRA either way. We're either going to submit it electronically or we're going to print it. So we need to create one. We're going to do a T1ADJ. You can use the keyword T1-ADJ if you want to, or at the very bottom of your Smart Start, it's going to give you requests for an adjustment. You then have to pick which form you're going to use because they've changed the formatting. If it's 2018 or older, you're going to use T1 adjustment year 2018 and older. Otherwise, you're using year 2019 and after. We're not going to do retransmit using refile. We are not set up for that. If that changes in the future, we'll all find out about it in January when we do our great training and we get ready for an office. But for now, those are the only two we're going to use. We're going to change a 2020 return. That's the only one we're going to change. So we're going to pick 2019, and then we have to pick the year. So you don't have to open up a tax year 2020 in order to do an adjustment. You can do any prior year you want. I have gone back as far as 10 years. It's going to ask for the address. If it's the same as their current return, I am in Peters. Thank you for pointing that out. I will take that out, and I will put it in Christine's because we don't need to adjust Peters. We need to adjust Christine's. This is why it is green. All right, T1ADJ. So I'm going to do 2019 and after. I'm going to do 2020. Address, if it's the same as what she currently has on file with the CRA, you're going to say same address as on return. If she has moved since she filed her last tax return, you're going to enter an address. Let's assume that this is the same time we're doing her 2021 return, so it's the same. If you are authorized because you have done CRA authorization, you can do autofill my return, you can do rep a client, all of those things. Then you're going to say authorization letter previously filed. That means you can sign that adjustment and you can do the online adjustment without getting a signature from her. Then it's going to ask you for a line number, and these line numbers are generally federal line numbers most of the time. So now we have to say which line numbers we're going to change. Can I get a volunteer to tell me what line numbers I want to change? I'm going to let you know we're heading into our non-refundable tax credits. So which line numbers do I want to adjust for Christine for 2020? $30425. Excellent. So I'm going to pick that one first. And then it's going to ask the old amount. The old amount is 0. What's the new amount? And for this one, I'm going to get this number here, 1755. So I can go back into my data entry and I can say 1755. Good. That's the first line number I want to amend. The second line number I want to amend is the disability transfer. Where will that one be? $31800. Excellent. Again, it's going to ask for the old amount, which is 0. What's the new amount? $8576, because she can transfer the max. Get that number wrong today, because it's a 2020 number. So I'm going to put it in and then I'm going to double check it. I can double check it from here. 8576 is correct. Good. If I needed a provincial number, I might be able to find a provincial number here. This is relatively new. If you're doing older data entry, you might need older data entry. If you're doing a line number that doesn't have one of those, if it's not in a drop-down box, you're going to describe it. You're going to say what form it's on. So it might be, for example, a Schedule 7. It might be a line number 15 on a Schedule 7. Whatever the extra line number is, you're going to put there. Everything you need to change, you're going to change in your data entry here. Okay, be as complete as possible. If you don't ask for it, then they're not going to give it to you. You do not need to change the refund or balance owing amount or the tax calculation. That will be done automatically by the CRA when they do the adjustment. But if you're changing income, make sure you think of everything that might be tied to that income. If you're changing a deduction, think of all of those. We're going to do this under production. So that's an excellent question. You find the numbers you want to change it to if you're amending one you already did. So if it's one that's in our computer and you need to know which line numbers, that's what you're going to use the plan for. The actual T1 adjustment you want to file, you're going to do that in production so that, again, when I come back 2 years from now to follow up and see what was done in a previous year, I can go into the return and go, I can see that in 2021, we filed a tax return and we also did an adjustment to the 2020 and it got filed. So this goes there. Okay, phone number we're going to leave blank. Then we need details. For details, we need to explain to the CRA what we are doing. So we're going to say, please adjust this return to allow the disability transfer from Christine Lee's father-in-law who lives with her. I don't mind a little extra detail. The transfer is on file with the CRA. And I would say statement attached. Please also allow the line 30450 claim attached is a Schedule 5 and a letter confirming Peter's income for 2020 and requesting that his disability transfer be given to Christine for that year. As much information as you have, plus a copy of any additional forms you need. So if you need a form to support the calculation, you want to include the form to support the calculation. If you need a worksheet, you want to include the worksheet. If you need a schedule, you want to include the schedule. Everything you need, put it in here, then say thank you. It is nice to be agents. They get to know you if you do a lot of these. If you are complete and you have everything you need and you are nice to them, They will do your returns, your adjustments faster. So always be kind and thorough. All right, then I'm going to hit save, and it's going to have all those details. And now I can go into Christine's tax return, and at the bottom, I'm going to have a T1 adjustment. It's going to have the information here. It's going to have the same as the return. It's going to have the line numbers that it wants to change, and then I'm going to have the details. I'm going to print this. I'm going to get Christine to sign it, or possibly I'm going to sign it depending on how complicated the adjustment is. Then I'm going to scan that in. I'm going to save the files that I had done, the fillable forms as well. I'm going to have my Schedule 8. I might have a letter that Peter will have signed with his information as well. All of that is going to get packaged, and then I can do this adjustment through Represent a Client. I can go online and I can say change the return as Represent a Client, put the line numbers in again. I'm going to have to redo this portion of it using Represent a Client. And then after I've submitted it, I can upload all of my documents, and that way everything will go together. So I'm going to upload everything I said I was going to upload and a copy of this. That's why I want to have this one signed and then scanned. If it's a paper return, you're basically going to do the same thing, but you're going to print it. So then I would print this form, get her to sign it, or I would sign it, put all of the documents together, and mail it. And I would mail it to where it tells me to mail it. So because they're in Winnipeg, we would mail it to the Winnipeg Tax Center. That's how we do adjustments. So you want to make sure they're in the computer. You want to generate all the forms you need, whether you generate the forms in a plan, if you can, or if you haven't done that return and you're doing old ones, maybe you're doing old tuition adjustments and you have to do lots of fillable forms of Schedule 11s or MBS 11s, or maybe you're doing this type, which is a disability transfer. Very common. We do these ones by hand. Do the fillable forms, save them. If you can do it online, you're going to do it online. If you can't do it online, you have to do it by paper. Put everything together, print it, and send it. And then you wait. All right. Are there any questions about how to do adjustments in the computer? We can't file them electronically from DT Max. We have to file it through Represent a Client. But if you have all your documents ready and signed and scanned, you can upload everything directly, which is really nice. All right, we have 9 minutes left. So let's see how much of the rest of these questions we can go through. So I had Sandra. Sandra Williams-Smith had a family. Let's take a look at that family here. I'm going to go up a couple practice problems. She was separated from her husband. She has full custody. Full custody. She is receiving payments. She separated on December 10th, 2020. We have a written agreement, so we're going to be doing support. She had no income prior to the separation. She collected social assistance, then she had a job. Babysitting for her mother, wasn't paying her mother, so can't claim child care there. But she did a daycare, so we did daycare. Okay, T4E, I want you to be careful when you have this. If she recently had a child, she might have had parental leave instead. Keep an eye out for that parental leave. If you find parental leave, take a look in your textbook for what to do with that. T5007, I wanted you to have a box 14 because it's going to change your provincial amounts. Okay, if you had a box 14, you would have gotten a different amount than if you didn't have it. If you didn't put a box 14 in, it will default to 0 and she will not get any provincial credits, but she is entitled to some. Other than that, if you have a question, I'm going to take a look at it. If you don't, I'm going to go on to the next ones because I had more complicated questions after that. Okay, I also include in this one 4 notes that you get marks for, and then a provincial one where if you're in an office, I expect the provincial one to be included. If we're doing it for an exam, I just needed the 4 federal notes. All right, so we have done 1, 2, and 3, and 4. That leaves Leaf and Judy Erickson and Bonita White. Let's take a look at them. Leaf and Judy Erickson, we had some additional information from the Erickson file, so you should have had some carry forward information there. Here we go. We have some part-time income for Judy. We have some donations. They had a joint savings account, so you would have had to have figured out how to split that. I'm going to make sure you take a look at the data entry for that. We had some transfers. They both signed up for my account. They want to receive their notice of assessment from the website, so I want to make sure we've done that as well. And in this case, you're going to have that $5,000 federal transfer and the provincial one. Make sure you know the provincial amount and prepare their returns. So let's take a look at them. Again, I have not cloned anyone in. It's just the two of them. I want you to notice I have the email for Leaf and Judy and Internet entered on Leaf's because he's the family head. He had higher income. He's the family head. And I said email yes. And then Judy, I had to enter the same email in a second time because I won't be able to put it in unless I specifically say so. Okay. Other than that, only enter the T5 once. So if you've entered the T5, put it on one person. Doesn't matter whose in this case. And then you're going to put the full amount in and then say own share 50 and transfer. That's a lot safer than doing the math by yourself and then doubling up your data entry. So anytime you can split things, use the computer to split it for you. And then we would have had this transfer amount for dependent not processed, 5,000, the provincial amount that we had calculated before. And then we go to the tax return and you get the answer you should be getting. And just a quick reminder, they are signing up for online mail this year. Next year, they won't need to sign up again. They will already have it. So next year, our data entry would be under my account and would confirm that. You do have to put the email in twice. Okay, now I had some difficult questions on this one, so I want to talk about those quickly. So Judy has asked to have Leaf claim the donations. Why might I advise her to reconsider that? Why might I suggest not doing it that way? Judy's owing money. If I changed the donations, she wouldn't be owing money. So what I would like you to do, if you haven't already done it, try to get the computer to do that. If we talk her into saying, you know what, let's do it this way, you both get a refund. It's going to give us a lot of options in an office setting. If it's a large enough refund, we might be able to do instant refund for both of them, depending. So there's lots of reasons we might want to do that, and it might bring the cost of their return down as well. So if they're both going to get refunds, they're both going to be happy. See if you can figure out how to move them. So the default is to give them to Leaf. He's the family head. He's going to get them unless you say otherwise. All right, so that's one. If she is adamant that she wants it to go to him and she's not worried about the balance owing, leave the default as is. But if you think that it's better for her to do the other way, have a conversation. And what I would do is check and see when you do it, what's the family difference? Are they getting the same amount between the two of them? And if you'd had tried it out and tested it out, you'd see that they do. Okay. And then my next question was, what data entry did you have to use for Leaf for the tuition transfer? We did that already. If she had been a resident of Newfoundland and Labrador instead of Manitoba, what would you have to do to determine the amount of provincial tuition transfer? Did anyone try and figure that out? If she was in Newfoundland and Labrador, and she was resident of Newfoundland and Labrador, and she wanted to transfer credits to her parents, what would we have to do? You needed to look this up in your provincial supplement or your facts and figures book. The rule for Manitoba is you calculate what she would be able to transfer there and what she is able to transfer here, and you get the smaller amount, whichever one is smaller. So in that case, we would have to do the return for her as if she was in Newfoundland, and then see which is smaller, and that's the amount of transfer that we would get. So just for fun, I'm going to go back to my Erickson. Okay, and I'm going to have to do a little bit of juggling here because it's going to be different if I've added in Jasmine. So I'm going to delete Jasmine, which in real life I would not be able to do. I can always put her back in later. And I'm going to say, what if she was in Newfoundland? Now, this is not necessarily accurate because she might have been getting tax deducted at a different rate, but maybe she was working in Manitoba, but she's renting an apartment in Newfoundland, so this is correct. In that case, if I go to the tax return here, it's going to make me do a little bit of extra things here. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to take a look at her provincial S11, and I want you to notice in this one, she was only able to transfer $3,368.06. Okay, so 336806. Then if I go in here and I did it the same thing again, but as, oh, that's not my file. This is where we have a problem when there's more than one. This is my file. We have the same one, but it was Manitoba. If it was Manitoba, she would get more. So I can't claim at the Manitoba rate. I have to claim it at the Newfoundland rate. So on her return, it would be what it looks like. On his return, this would be a smaller number than what it would be if we were calculating Manitoba. If the families were in the opposite places, you might have to change what she's transferring on hers. So if she's entitled to a larger transfer there and a smaller transfer here, we have to limit it to the max that's allowed. So that's something that I want you to think about. And we've just hit 12 o'clock, so we are officially done. I have one more file to do. I will make sure I record this one tomorrow. I'm going to make a point of getting this one on the recording so you can follow the recording. I'm also going to stay late after class today to review it if you want an answer now. Other than that, congratulations. Thank you for sticking with me. I know this course is a lot of work, and I know you've all been working really, really hard. We're in the final stretch. Finish your practice problems. Ask for help if you're having questions. If I see all of you at the review class, I will be very happy. If I don't see you, I hope you enjoyed your time. Have a really good Christmas, and I'm hoping that I'll see a few of you in an office setting possibly for next year. So have a really, really good week. Study hard, practice a lot, and then pat yourselves on the back for finishing a very difficult course.